In Frozen Empire, an original villain descends upon New York, and Ghostbusters, both new and old, must once again save the world. Afterlife relied heavily on nostalgia, so here's hoping that Frozen Empire is a satisfying movie on its own terms. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
If you weren't a Spengler, you'd be answering our phones.
This is a movie podcast, and we have been working through all of the Ghostbusters movies over the last 4 weeks, and today we have finally got a chance to see Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the 5th movie in the franchise, if you can believe it. I had that thought as I was watching it, that for most of my life there was only 2 Ghostbusters movies, and then all of a sudden in a relatively short span of time we're now up to 5. But here we are, so
yeah,
we're going to get into it. We'll start spoiler free as we always do, especially for a new release. Obviously you might want to hear some sort of general thoughts before you decide to go see it yourself. And then we'll give a spoiler warning and get into the meat and potatoes and talk about all the plot details and whatnot. Before we do get started though, I'll just remind you that if you do enjoy the show, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch on YouTube. And of course, there's some bonuses you can get over on Patreon, some bonus shows that me and David do, but I'll tell you more about them at the end. But for now, let's get into Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which, the plot of which, I feel like there's not really much to say in a sort of spoiler-free sense, just to say there's a big ghost that freezes everything, that's the big bad, it's coming to New York, and the Ghostbusters will ultimately have to contend with it. That's it.
I mean, I would also say on the interpersonal side, we have the coming-of-age story for our main character.
Sure.
I'm blanking on her name for some reason.
Phoebe,
that's right. The coming-of-age of Phoebe, and like, where does she stand in the Ghostbusters, and like, do people recognize her as being just as capable as the adults and whatnot?
Yeah, that family dynamic's there. The family from the last movie, and I include Paul Rudd in that because he's dating the mum. Are the Ghostbusters now active in New York? That's kind of something that the trailer kind of made it clear that was the case, but that's what the movie makes it very clear right early on, and then everything kind of unfolds from there. And we've been up and down with this franchise. We had many positive things to say about the original. Definitely not as, complete praise for the second one, but a lot to enjoy still. And then the last 2 were both very flawed and had a lot of things to talk about in terms of what wasn't quite clicking together, even if there was some positive sort of eking through in some cases. So I was very curious getting into this to see maybe, now that we've done the return of the original continuity, what does it do now? Does it do its own lore? Does it set up its own villain? Does it just feel like a new standalone thing? Is it still mired in being really nostalgic? What is it going to be? I genuinely thought it could go a number of different ways.
Oh yeah, there was always the chance that this is just going to say, like, again, oh hey, don't you remember this from the original Ghostbusters? Isn't this a thing that, because especially this time around, they're back in New York. We're back in the firehouse. We've got all of these like original settings that we can play with. And obviously that's something that they could get very nostalgic over. They could sit there and say like, hey guys, remember the loan office that they went to in Ghostbusters 1? We're gonna go back there. But then obviously there's the alternative of they spent the entire first movie doing that. They spent all of Afterlife setting up these sort of nostalgic things, and now they are able to do their own thing. So yeah, I was much like you. I had no idea what we were going to get out of this one coming in. I was hoping it was just Ghostbusters 2, because why not?
I will say just one positive point before I just get to asking what our general feelings are, is I will say that the inclusion of the original cast, and this is not to say that everything that they're involved in this is gold or great or anything, but I will say it didn't feel like, because they're more sprinkled in naturally throughout, and their inclusion early on, at least for most of them, makes sense. It at least felt like by the time we get to the third act and they're involved, it felt like, well, of course they're involved. They've been sort of intermingling with the characters in the plot the whole time. Why wouldn't they come and get involved?
Right.
I'm specifically meaning the same characters that were in the last one that showed up, your classic Ghostbusters. So I will say that was at least one improvement. I think just by the nature of, like, in the last one, they saved them till that moment in Act 3, pretty much. So it was like, here's your treats, everyone. You waited around to get some nostalgia. Here's your original Ghostbusters. here because no, it makes sense. Ray's a bit more involved in the plot. Winston's doing the whole money thing where he's financing everything and he's running the operations in a sort of corporate level. They're a bit more included in a way that feels like, oh no, they're just part of the movie as opposed to feeling like cheap cameos.
Yeah,
so
this is one where it definitely makes sense that I believe all of them were in like the opening credits. Like all of them showed up in the top billing, obviously not very top billed, but they showed up in that sort of period.
They do, but they sort of make a special classification for them because I noticed this. They do like, so all the main cast, and that'll just be all the sort of actors for the major new characters, and then it'll say special appearances by, and it lists all of the like returning legacy cast, almost like they get a special separate list. Be like, hey, we had to really roll out the money dump trucks to get all these people back on board, so they're getting special mentions here.
But like, I think that it makes more sense that they're even there at all than the last movie, where the last movie, it was just basically a glorified cameo. I didn't feel like they deserved to be up on top of the credits. They should have just been for cameo status.
What's funny is actually some of the new characters from the last one are the ones who feel more unnatural. They're still in this. Like, why all of you here?
I can totally accept the families here. I can totally accept that Paul Rudd is here because he's dating the mom and he loves Ghostbustering so much. But anyone else from Oklahoma, you better have a damn good reason. And they didn't.
And even the family to an extent. Not that I get why they're the four main cast you want to have back. And I get that why we're at the point now where they're just the active Ghostbusters, but I do almost think, I feel there's a story to tell here how they made this, because it's not like they were actively the Ghostbusters team at the end of Afterlife. They were, because one of the thoughts I had when I first saw Afterlife, I don't think I mentioned it in the review, but one of the thoughts I had when it set up like teases in the post-credit scene and stuff for a sequel was like, well, yeah, but like, okay, so the car's going back to New York and Winston's going to do a whole bunch of stuff. That's cool, but why would this family with two teenagers like still be involved with any of this next time? And then at the start of this movie, they're just the active Ghostbusters. It's Paul Rudd, Carrie, Coon, and the two kids.
I can fully see a world where they are allowed to come back to New York and like stay in the firehouse or whatever. The kids really want to be Ghostbusters. Paul Rudd really wants to be a Ghostbuster, but I don't think that you could have convinced me that Carrie Coon is like definitely a member of this team based off of where she was at the end of the last movie.
Based on the last movie, but I feel like she's really into it in this one, and I almost think that's a more interesting story. What's the story of what was the character? Callie. What's the story of Callie Spengler? Sort of like, you know what, I'm kind of into this. Like, even just one little flashback of where, like, maybe like you have one flashback scene where the other three of them are like, hey, this is a good idea. We could go move to the firehouse and be the Ghostbusters. Winston's given his carte blanche to go be this. And she doesn't want to do it. I want the scene where they convince her, and then the first time she like traps a ghost and is like, oh, I felt a tingle. I felt this is making me tingle more than Paul Rudd does. I'm into this. Let's go bust some ghosts.
I wouldn't even be like needing to see it. I would just need Paul Rudd to say like, hey, remember when you caught your first ghost? Remember that? And like a brief description, and just seeing her face light up and saying like, all right, yes, it is awesome.
All right. Anyway, so I'll just ask the general question.
Yes.
David, what did you think of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire?
Better than the last two, hands down. I think that there was definitely a few moments of like wankery where it was like, oh, hey, the firehouse. Look at the pole, everybody. We've got the pole.
That pole is definitely worshipped in this movie.
Yes,
there's no denying.
Absolutely.
It ends up being a pivotal plot point at one point as well.
So there's definitely moments of that, but it is toned down significantly from the last movie. It does do its own thing. It sets up its own sort of lore mythology. I'm not going to say that I enjoy every aspect of the mythology they set up. There's one big swing they take with a new character that I think I just don't like the idea of in general. But in terms of how the whole movie plays out, I would say this is on par to Ghostbusters 2. I think that this is something that I feel can stand with the original two movies fairly comfortably in terms of quality.
Interesting. So I can agree to an extent that some of what I didn't like about Afterlife is toned down, although there's still some pretty glaring examples of it, which we are going to talk about. I think this is a worse movie than Afterlife, though, in terms of its script.
Okay.
Because I think it's a script / however much they cut out of this movie, because you can tell they chopped up a lot of subplots in this. There's things in the trailer, and it's not, it's not that weird to see a couple of moments in the trailer that don't make it into the final movie, but there's a lot of them. There was a lot of things where I was waiting for moments from the trailer and they never came, and some of the subplots in this felt so ancillary. There's too many characters and they did not know what to do with half of them. It really is, and I actually got kind of annoyed because I was kind of into the first 15-20 minutes because I thought, oh, you know what? One of the things I did like the last time was the characters, and I liked their chemistry. I liked the kind of weird relationship that Carrie Coon had with her kids, where she would say, she would speak a little bit more mean as a mum, but in a sort of playful way, and the way they bounced off of each other was quite fun. And you get a lot of that in the first, not the very first scene, but the first scenes with them at the start of the movie. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. They're more of a family dynamic. We're in the firehouse, all good stuff. And then they kept bringing in more characters, and they're bringing in the main plot, and it got to a point where most of the characters I liked felt like they went into the background and barely had a plot for the rest of the movie, where it focused on a lot of other things. And on top of all that, I think the main plot, the actual sort of build up to what the Frozen Empire is and the main villain, I think they wait absurdly long to actually get to the point with that stuff. It's actually not until the end of Act 2, really, where they even say, oh, hey, here's where the villain kind of enters. Up until then, it's just a bunch of MacGuffin stuff and kind of some loose jokes, some scenes that are designed around nostalgia. And I'll be honest, at one point, Janine said the line, we didn't just buy this firehouse for the nostalgia. And I'm like, movie, I will punch every writer in the face for that line. I will. That's fair. You're making fun of people who are critical of this bullshit, and it doesn't make it okay. It just makes... Anyway, so... Well, the parts of this I like more than Afterlife, because it at least feels like it's doing a new story. But I think as a constructed movie with pacing, with a script, I think this is much worse. I think it's overlong. It takes too long to actually get into the meat of it. The interesting character dynamics are put in the back seat. Some of these characters could just not be in the movie, including some of the family. Like Finn Wolfhard's character, the brother Trevor. You could cut out anything he's doing where he's not with the other family members, and it wouldn't affect a thing. They bring back Lucky. Honestly, most of her stuff you could cut out. It wouldn't affect a thing. Podcast, which actually on this, I had to double check it was the same actor, because this kid has had such a growth spurt between so don't get me wrong, so is Phoebe, right? McKenna Grace, they did a good job of making her look like she did in the last movie with the hair and the glasses and stuff, but every so often there was a moment where she'd say something or give a look where I'm like, oh no, you're actually 18 now, playing this character, right? You've went over that line. But Podcast shows up and I'm like, I get that you're supposed to be Podcast, but you've had a growth spurt and you've also lost some weight or something, because you look like a different person. But I checked, it's the same kid. It's the same guy.
Oh yeah. No, puberty hit him like a truck, no doubt.
I mean, for the better, he looks much better than he did. He was a little snot-faced brat in that last movie, so fair enough. Good for him. Yeah. He's looking healthy. He's looking, all the young ladies are going to be beating him off with a stick, or he'll be beating them off with a stick. You know what I mean?
Which, I mean, fully self-deprecating here.
Yeah.
There's no way he's doing a podcast when he looks like that.
Oh no, he's into the podcast. He's into that. He's too committed to that life.
Let me rephrase. He's switching to video. There's no way.
Well, they're on YouTube. That's the point they make at the start. They just and subscribe. They're on YouTube now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. He's not in front of the camera though. He tries to stay behind.
Well, he's got
advantage of that.
He's got a celebrity. He's got a Ghostbuster to be on camera.
Yeah, that's true.
Sense. Yeah,
but going off what you were saying there, I agree with pretty much all of your points. I think it is weird, just how long it takes to really get to the villain part of it. I think there are way too many subplots that go nowhere. I think that pretty much Lucky, Finn, and Podcast could just disappear from this movie, and nothing would change. I can't think of a single thing that they impacted at all. But I don't think that it's bad enough for me to care. Like, those subplots, yes, they went nowhere. And I think the only one that pissed me off that it didn't go further was Finn Wolfhard's subplot about what's up in the attic. Just because I think that one they basically just did for a rule of 3. They did like an intro scene with it. They did like trying to set it up a bit more, and then it pays off in the third act. But it seemed like it deserved more. But yeah, I don't think that it's bothering me as much, because the movie isn't so much focused on this big ghost guy needs to show up earlier in the plot and be like a threat throughout the movie. It's focused on what happens when the big ghost guy gets out. It's focusing on, here's all the trouble it causes. We're setting up like the MacGuffins as to what exactly would allow him to escape. It's essentially doing what happened in the original 2 Ghostbusters movies with
I know,
Vigo and Gozar.
I know this is the structure of the classic Ghostbusters movies, but the big threat doesn't really come until Act 3. I think the difference is, particularly compared to the first one, and 2 is a bit more like this, but they focus so much on the build-up to it. Whereas in Ghostbusters 1, arguably, no, the movie's about them becoming Ghostbusters for most of it, and then they kind of sprinkle in some of this villain so that they can have something to do in the third act. Right. This feels like, no, we're really focused on kind of we're setting up this lore. The opening scene teases all this stuff, and then they're talking about this MacGuffin and what will happen. And I do think the plot to actually unleash what happens is kind of convoluted in a way that irks me. I don't buy. There's a sequence of events that I don't think I quite sit with.
I think that's probably one of the things that was cut that shouldn't have been. It felt like there was a missing step or two of getting to the point of like explaining how characters came to certain conclusions. Specifically what Phoebe ends up doing that really triggers everything. That just felt like it came out of nowhere. It
was so funny to me because I'm watching it and I'm thinking, I like that it feels like they're active as Ghostbusters throughout, because there's a couple of scenes where they'll get like a call and they'll leave, and like we won't follow and do the ghost case, we'll follow another character, but it really gives this impression is that they're getting calls every day or two to go out and bust some ghosts. And I feel like even Ghostbusters 1 and 2, like all of the regular busting is basically just after you get a first ghost, there's a montage in the middle, and then it's about building up whatever the main big bad is, right? Yeah. And it did make me think, you know what, Ghostbusters might just be better suited to a TV show at this point, where you've got like a 40-minute episode, have them do a more simple, down-to-earth ghostbusting case, and there you go. You've got an episode, wrap it, next one.
I mean, it's going to be structured. Obviously, you've been doing reviews on Smallville. It's going to be structured like season 1, season 2 of that, where you get your ghost of the week, and then there's going to be like that little bit of overarching plot that just spreads across the entire season until you get to the finale.
So many like Monster of the Week shows you could have picked, and you went with Smallville to compare it.
I'm trying to pitch other shows on the channels, Pete, but if you don't want inner marketing, then fine. I'm going to say other stuff.
Yeah, sometimes quality matters more.
Well, it's not like there's any other hit television shows that follow that method, so...
How dare you? How dare you? Anyway, so I think it's kind of messy. It feels like a lot was cut out in editing, because maybe they did the initial cut and realized, oh god, this is almost 3 hours long. We have to cut out as much of this as humanly possible. And I think it feels quite choppy, because I think the main family story they're kind of going for, which is like, okay, you've got the coming of age stuff with Phoebe, and you've also got this idea of like, okay, how does Paul Rudd fit into this family? Is he part of the family now? And that's set up right at the start, is this idea of like, what do I call myself, in reference to the kids? Am I a stepdad? Am I this? And that's like a running thing throughout the movie. And that's not really spoiling anything. It's just...
No, I do love what he calls himself, like, first time around. A character asks him, like, and what's your relation to this young girl? And he's like, I'm her step teacher. It's like, yep, good job. You're good.
Right. And I think, honestly, those core stories, I felt like, give me like twice as much time with these family kids. I know we said Finn could be cut, but I think Finn being part of the family means he probably should be there, just with a more important part of the story, like something a bit more relevant to what's going on. Yeah, he's really just there to crack some jokes and have like a silly little subplot. And nothing really spelled out that there was too many characters for me. Then when we get to the end of the movie and there's like 10 people in Ghostbusters outfits all firing proton packs at the same time, I'm like, okay. Some of these characters just have nothing, and even the classic characters, like, all they really contribute in the entire third act is effectively flipping a switch. That's that's effectively all that happens. With no context, that's all they do. So, yeah, too many characters, chopped up to high heavens, maybe because the script was already kind of like messy in that sense, or because it was too long. But I felt like a lot of the subplots felt kind of weird and like undercooked as a result. It was speeding through a lot of things, and yet it felt like it was taking ages to get to like meatier parts of the story. So I think it's a really flawed movie. I think it still suffers from some of what I didn't like about Afterlife. So overall, I'm pretty lukewarm to maybe even negative on this.
I mean, that's fair. I just think back to the things we were saying about Ghostbusters 2, and I feel like the same criticisms that you're saying there could apply to Ghostbusters 2 as well. Like, we were critiquing several aspects of like the Vigo plot of Ghostbusters 2 for not having enough drawn out, and how it was chopped up a little bit weird, and why was the one guy a floating nanny ghost? I mean, I'm still confused about that.
There were jump steps in the Vigo plot for sure, but it did not have the too many characters problem. That is unique to this, and that has like symptoms that go beyond just itself, where all these extra subplots start to feel like fluff. A lot of these characters start to feel like fluff, and it was something. And more importantly, they take away focus from what are supposed to be the central characters. Where at a certain point, I'm like, I thought Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon were meant to be the two leads of this movie, and it feels like after the first half hour, they're only popping up for the odd moment here or there until it's time to wrap things up. And I felt like the dispute going on with Phoebe could have been getting more attention, more time, more of a story.
I mean, I think that it's a symptom of the problem of, obviously the original films were already an ensemble cast. If you counted it, I would say all of the main characters. You have the 4 Ghostbusters, you have Janine, and then I would count Lewis and Dana in there as well.
I mean, I would count Dana before even Janine, to be honest. She's like the next main character for sure.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. So already that's 7 people that you would consider to be like core ghost-busting cast members. Then you get to the new series here, and obviously they want to keep the family around. I'm sure that they want to keep these new characters of Lucky and Podcast around. They want to bring those forward as well. But then as they're able to get the original Ghostbusters team back into the movie again, they all want to show up. Now you're forced to have like 14 people, and you don't want to cut any of them.
And that's before you add like 2 or 3 new characters as well on top of all that. So too many. As far as the other things though, before we get into spoilers, I mean, obviously I like most of the cast for sure. They're you know, pretty, and that was true of the last one as well, to be fair.
Yeah.
What else?
I mean, can we bring up the one like brand new character, because I do have major problems with him, and I don't want to spoil anything about his plot, but like I do need to talk about him.
Yeah, it's all spoilers, but I assume you're talking about Kumail Nanjiani's character.
Yes. He is a new character. He pretty much brings the MacGuffin to the group, and then he kind of just sticks around for the rest of the plot doing various things. But I just remember everything we said about Ghostbusters 2016 and the style of humor that was there. He just rubbed me that way. He just rubbed me in the way of, he's not actually delivering a punchline. He's just saying like riffing statements on whatever the other characters are doing over and over again. The other characters are delivering punchlines for him, but he himself is just kind of a comedic relief character where we've already got like 4 other comedians on the cast.
He felt, and I like Kumail Nanjiani, but he did feel like he was doing a very modern version of comedy that feels different to Ghostbusters. I think my bigger problem with him though was kind of everything else with his like plot related to his character that comes later, which we can't talk about till spoilers. But there's that. Patton Oswalt shows up for a couple of scenes,
which it was so weird because he plays essentially a librarian character at one point. I don't know if like I actually knew he was in this movie somehow because I avoided trailers pretty hard, so I don't even know if he was
he was in the trailer, so I knew he was going to be here.
All right, I avoided trailers pretty hard, and like as soon as they were saying like, "Oh, I know a guy we can call," I'm like, I feel like this is Patton Oswalt. I feel like this is just what his character is across like all sci-fi. Is that he's eventually just that guy who knows things.
Fair enough. I can't dispute that. All right. So
yeah. Special effects are good. I don't think there was anything that I stood out as saying like, oh, that didn't work out.
Yeah, they're fine. Like it's like nothing I would say overly impressed me. It's taking a typical, big budget, summer blockbuster fare. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like the Good Apes movies where you're like, oh my god, this is pushing an envelope around. Yeah. It's perfectly fine. Nothing stuck out to me one way or the other.
There was nothing in this movie that I felt really stood out as like this whole thing was on a green screen or this whole thing was like 100% special effects. It felt like it did a good job of mixing together the practical stuff of driving around New York and all those locations and then putting the special effects over top of that.
Yeah. I mean, you say that, but I guarantee you a lot of those like shots in New York are probably just CG because these days they do that all the time now just so they can...
I'm pretty sure that around Hollywood, if they really wanted to, they could just like 1-to-1 scale model New York with all of the like models that have been made and nobody would be able to tell the difference. Like they could have people walking around VR and they'd be like, yep, this is New York.
I mean, just get the map from Spider-Man 2 and patch in a couple of the real buildings that they couldn't use for licensing reasons and boom, there you go.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'll just say this character's inclusion was also in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler to say that Walter Peck is back. Obviously, he's one of the nostalgia pools. I will say that I do think his position in this movie doesn't feel too forced. It feels like a natural evolution of where he might be. However, I will say everything related to him turns out to be a big fat nothing that actually doesn't matter and affect anything in the movie.
Yeah, that's fair. He definitely, I would say when it comes to the nostalgia pools, the biggest disappointments for me are him as Walter Peck and then Janine, because in the end, they just kind of are there to be there. They have a little bit of like 1 or 2 scenes, but for the most part, they're just, oh yeah, we need a character to fill this role for this one scene, and we may as well use the guy that already was in Ghostbusters.
He also, I think the problem is that it felt like they were setting up some big important things with him. It's like, oh, he's going to be this key antagonist in the movie that's going to really present obstacles, but then nothing he did mattered, ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, there's 2 MacGuffins in this movie, one that's a nostalgia pool, one that's brand new. And because of the nostalgia pool MacGuffin, you're pretty sure he's going to be involved in some way. But no, at no point does it come back up.
No. So, all right, we'll give spoiler warning so we can start going through it, talk about all the bits and pieces and whatnot. So the movie opens with a quote, actually.
It opens with a full poem.
Yeah.
Robert Frost's Fire and Ice poem.
Yeah. Also, did he just write a poem about ice because his name's Frost? Is that? He
did not. At least I'm like 95% sure. He's a famous poet. Shar, yes. Sorry.
I just caught it. All right, I just caught it, and I'm like, I'm using that.
Next time I have to edit comics and you say a weird word, I'm gonna zoom in on your face and replay it like 3 times.
For sure. I don't even know what accent that sounds like you're like slipping into.
That's my natural Baltimore accent.
So it's 1904. And the firehouse is actually just a firehouse. And it's not even like a fire truck, it's like a fire horse and carriage comes out of it.
Yep.
And it's basically just setting up that something related to the main plot happened in 1904. They go to a call. It's like a sort of private dining room. And they go to touch the door, and he's like, wait, it's cold. It's basically that moment in Back to the Future where he's like, was it hot? He's like, no, it's damn cold.
Yeah,
it's
they see like smoke coming out the door, but it turns out it's actually just like frost mist, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah, dry ice, I guess?
Yeah. Probably.
Is
CO2.
Does dry ice occur naturally? I guess it probably does.
It's frozen CO2, so in some aspects maybe, but usually not.
Yeah. So they go in and everyone's frozen, like Mr. Freeze has been stomping through here, asking what killed the dinosaurs and whatnot.
Yep, giant ice spikes and stuff impaling everybody.
Yeah, and they look around, and the things that stick out, though, is that there's, like, seemingly a woman, I guess. I didn't really get this in the scene at the time until we got more context for it later, but there's, like, a sort of like fancy gold or it was actually it's brass as we find out later, but it's like a brass outfit. It's got like brass danglies down the front of the face and all that, and they're holding a MacGuffin, almost like it's a sphere with like sort of carvings on it, like symbols. It was giving me vibes of like the lament configuration from Hellraiser or something like that.
No, it's pretty spot on. That's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, and it just kind of teases that, you know, there's something in there. The camera kind of zooms into it and whatnot.
It goes in and we see two glowing eyes on the inside.
Yeah.
So clearly that's our villain.
Yes. But they just say Zal. Not Zul. It's Zal now.
They say Shar.
So we can't head to present day. And it does this sort of classic movie thing where it starts off with them wrapping up a case, right? So they're chasing through the street a sort of big sort of
sewer dragon.
It's like sewer dragon ghost that's flying through the air, and they're dipping and diving. Phoebe wants to use the gunner seat. They're all saying no. I will say they do a couple of smart things here in terms of writing exposition, where they have them kind of bickering about some of the key things that are going to be coming up whilst they're in the middle of the action scene. Which makes it feel less like clunky exposition. It feels more like, you know, you're getting some like stimulation while you're getting the information, so there's a bit more going on.
Yeah, it does come off a little bit clunky. I would say the worst of it, though, is Finn Wolfhard. He's apparently turned 18, and he keeps on saying, like, oh, I want to drive the Ghostbusters car. And they're just like, oh, nope, you can't yet, for whatever reason.
Yeah, and then Phoebe calls her mum Callie by her name, and she's like, what? No, I'm mum. You call me mum. And then Paul Rudd jumps in, and you call me Gary's fine. Gary's fine. And that sets up the whole, like, okay, what is he to the kids kind of thing, which I do, like, I kind of like it, like I said, in a sense that it makes sense to do this plot for the family, like, side of things and the character relationships. I will say, though, there's a bit of an asterisk here, and I do think the kids are actually too old to bother with doing it, because I feel like if you get a stepdad when you're already, like, in or, like, past puberty, you're never going to need to call them dad. It doesn't matter. They're just, you know, like, you're old enough at that point, you don't have to have a replacement father. You sort of accept them for what they are, but, you know, if you're 4 years old or 6 years old and your mum gets a new husband, not that he's married yet, but, you know, at that point, maybe you say, okay, like, it kind of makes sense that you build that relationship.
I don't think it's so much about what the kids call him. Like, the plot as a whole is more of he wants to know his relationship with the kids. Like, is he able to take on that fathership role to them? I
would agree with what you're saying, except for the fact that the payoff to all this at the end is that Phoebe accidentally calls him dad, and sort of smiles about it and shrugs it off like it's not a big deal. But then he's like, yes, did you hear that? Yes, fireworks!
But see, I think that just is furthering the plot of what I was saying, is that he's now like, yes, I can do it. All right, cool. They accept me as dad. I can step into the fathership role.
Okay. Anyway, so they're chasing the ghost. They launched a little RC trap, but this ghost starts flying up out of the sky. It's like, oh, it's out of range. So Callie's like, oh, don't worry, I've got it. And she puts on, like, so it's almost basically the goggles that Ray wore in the first movie, but now they're actually like a VR headset to control the drone trap, which then flies up, and, you know, they get that. And there's a nice little bit of excitement when like they bring the gunner seat in as they're as she's about to hit something, so she's sort of like folded halfway as they're just going past another car or something like that. There's a couple of fun little bits in this scene.
Let me ask you a question here.
Regarding
the proton pack.
Yes.
Ostensibly, from what the previous movies have shown, the idea of the proton pack is it holds the ghost still, so that the trap can be put out, and then the trap brings it in. This sewer dragon was just still flying wildly. It didn't seem like there was any level of control on keeping it still. And now they have a hyper-mobile trap. So I guess my question is, what's the point of the proton pack anymore?
No, this makes sense to me. So it's still flying because ultimately it's big and strong enough that one beam's not going to like be, but it's tethered them to it. I think if it wasn't held with the beam, it would just be further and further away, and they would just never get to it.
Okay, so you think it's like kind of like a rope, like a just keeping the distance but not keeping it in place.
It's like a fishing reel that you can't reel in, right? It's just sort of keeping it in place so they can get the trap out in position.
All right, that's fair. I can accept that.
I think if you had like this is the thing. This is why like sometimes there's like 2 or 3 of them holding the same ghost because they're quite tough and they'll sort of pull and they'll yank you around and stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
also something that completely slipped my mind was even a character trait until you just started talking about the scene again. We get the one single bad joke that Phoebe tells in the beginning.
That's right. This was like a thing for the entire first movie.
Yeah, the entire movie. And then they got to this movie, they're like, and we're done with that, but we just need to clarify this is still a thing.
What was so funny about it, though, is that I did actually like the way she winked after she told this joke, because it was a terrible joke. But the way she winked after she said it was just so like, you're too confident. You're too confident about this joke.
For me, that was 100% Egon. That was 100% like, yeah, that's your grandfather sneaking through right there.
Yeah, I can see that. Actually, that's one of the things that is before this sequence is there's like almost like a previously on Ghostbusters like news report thing where it's like, hey, well, no, it's after this scene because they talk about the damage first and then they explain it because they go like, oh, there was damage today, the Ghostbusters, and these Ghostbusters are descendants of original Ghostbuster Egon Spengler, and he was a Ghostbuster with Winston, and Winston's funding all this, and they actually show like context for why the song exists in universe because they show like a TV ad for the toys and the songs playing, and then they actually show a clip, and I couldn't believe this, although it makes sense that it exists in universe given the song exists, the music video with them dancing with Ray Parker Jr. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that exists in universe if the song exists, so
wholesale in between Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, you just know Venkman went on a marketing tear. Like 100% got all of this stuff actually made.
Joe, what's so funny about this is that I almost just want that movie of Venkman capitalizing the shit out of all of this and like selling toys with commercials and getting a theme song and making them minor celebrities. And also, they straight up reference the Statue of Liberty from Ghostbusters 2.
Which does officially canonize Ghostbusters 2 because the last movie didn't mention any of that.
No. I almost feel like they did that intentionally because they knew people were saying, well, does Ghostbusters 2 still count? And like, yeah, it still does. We just kind of ignored it.
Not only that, they doubled up on it because immediately following this scene, there's a few things to talk about, but immediately following the scene, Phoebe goes to talk to Ray in his bookstore, and she's like, by the way, I brought you some more mood goo. And she has the purple, like the pink slime again. It's like, okay, cool. We're just doubling down. All of Ghostbusters 2 happened.
Yeah. That said, though, like Ray's store comes from Ghostbusters 2, so there was always that one tether to it.
Oh well, yeah,
even in the last movie. But yeah, that's all fine. That's all fine. So they get grilled out at the mayor's office, and this chair spins around. Walter Peck is now the mayor of New York City, and I'm like, okay, like I groaned a little bit when I saw him in the trailer, but it makes sense he would try this at least, you know. And obviously he succeeded. He's become mayor, right? It makes sense that he's a politician. This is what he wanted. And he starts grilling them out. I actually think maybe the funniest line of the movie's in this scene. So basically, when they're in the car before they set it up, where Finn Wolfhard starts complaining that they're being made to do all this shit, and like, hey, we're not getting paid. Are you getting paid, Phoebe? And she's like, nah. Right? And then in this scene, he's like saying, oh, you have caused all this damage, blah, blah, blah. You Ghostbusters are a menace, right? And then he's like, wait a minute, what age are you? And Finn Wolfhard jumps in and goes, oh, I'm 18. I just turned 18. I'm an adult now. And he's like, no, not you, dipshit. What, you, the girl. What age are you? And she's like, 15. Oh, a minor. That's great. And then Paul Rudd goes up to speak to him sort of one-on-one. And he's like, well, so you're doing like child endangerment and stuff. Like, you're not a parent, you're an employer. And he's like, no, we don't pay her. And then he just goes, ugh. Like, I actually thought the we don't pay her was maybe the funniest punchline in the whole movie to me.
No, that's fair. It got a laugh in my theater as well. I thought that was a great line altogether because it is one of those things where he's just like trying to help, but he's just he's speaking faster than he's thinking, and it just comes out. He's like, oh, actually, never. Gonna go back with my family now, or whoever they are to me.
That sounded bad, but yeah. So basically, she has to be benched. She's not allowed to go out on missions until she's 18 now, because technically this is a big can of worms. And to be fair, he makes some good points. Children aren't allowed to be police officers or firefighters, so why should a child be a Ghostbuster?
And, like, I get it. I 100% get it. But I also get why he's the villain, because, like, all of the points that Walter Peck made in the first movie were valid points, but he's just an asshole. So, like, you kind of don't care. Well, and here he's making this valid point of saying, like, oh, this kid shouldn't be a Ghostbuster. Like, it's a dangerous job. And, like, yeah, no, you're right. But you suck, and I don't like you. So Phoebe should be a Ghostbuster.
Well, see, I think the parents ultimately agree with them and sort of, okay, we're going to enforce this. She's not allowed on missions. And I like that because it's like, yeah, he's got a point. Yeah, obviously for the rest of the movie, he's looking for any reason to shut them down. And also what you said there, all the points he made in the first movie, which were also kind of valid, they were kind of proven that it didn't matter because he still broke the containment and all the ghosts came out and caused chaos all over the city. So he should at least believe the ghosts are real at this point, if nothing else. Like, he's seen enough shit. He was landed on by, like, 4 tons of marshmallow or whatever it was. So
I gave him a concussion. He actually forgot that he saw all the ghosts come out.
So, yeah. Okay, I'm fine with this. I'm fine with, like, the story set up here being, okay, we're dealing with the family stuff. There's a little scene here where Paul Rudd's talking to Carrie Coon, and she's like, hey, it's great that you're their buddy and you kind of, like, side with them sometimes, but, you know, you gotta be an adult and, like, be an asshole to them occasionally. And he's like, well, okay, yeah, I mean, I get that, but, like, I'm just not sure, like, when am I crossing a line? Like, what, you know, he doesn't say this, you know, he implies this, though. He's like, when am I crossing a line and disciplining when that's your job and it shouldn't be me because I'm not the dad, right? And she basically just says, hey, permission granted to say, yeah, do fatherly things. Do give them into trouble when they're doing something wrong. Be the adult. And I'm like, okay, I like that as a setup. I also like that Phoebe is butthurt, that she wants to go out on mission. She likes being a Ghostbuster. And she does a little bit of that Transformers 3 Shia LaBeouf thing where she starts complaining and is like, I saved the world. I should be able to go be a Ghostbuster. All these idiots wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for me. And don't get me wrong, she's much more, one, justified because she actually did do all the smart stuff. Whereas Shia LaBeouf did nothing in Transformers 2 to save the world. He
yelled Optimus.
Right? And she's also more likable than Sam Witwicky. I can't believe I remember that name. Ever was. But
it's a very unique name, and the fact that a plot point revolves around the last name, it makes sense why it's in your head.
Yes. Plus I saw them all last year again, so that's why it's relatively fresh. But still, I think the comparison's kind of valid. But it makes more sense, though. It's more justifiable, because unlike Sam Witwicky in Transformers 3, when he's like 22, she's 15 years old. She's supposed to be a teenager and a little bit, you know, rebellious, little bit, you know, up her own ass. Like, that's just kind of normal. That's a teenager.
Yeah. Parents also make the interesting point of being like, look, now is the time in your life where you're allowed to just, like, mess up and try things. You don't have to carry this responsibility of, like, real world implications over your head.
Yeah, which actually, so this is after later on the library stuff, but I'll just skip to it now because it ties into what you just said. They do almost like a callback. Remember in the sort of date scene last time, there was like, oh, I wish she'd make some mistakes and do something. There's a joke about her, or maybe she'll take up pole dance, and they kind of crack some jokes about it. They kind of follow that up, says, hey, we told you to make some mistakes, but, you know, we thought something smaller, like, you know, maybe get a tattoo. And then Paul Rudd says, yeah, or maybe some shoplifting, you could try that. And Carrie Coon plays along and says, yeah, that'll be fun, but she gives him a look like, okay, dude, there was a line there. There was a line. Like, I can live with my daughter getting a tattoo she'll regret. I cannot live with her being a shoplifter.
I mean, I would say any crime at all is probably outside the realm of it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think she means, yes, something silly, or, you know, maybe
make a mistake that isn't going to put you on some sort of, you know, misdemeanor/felony list.
Yes, that's probably the good way. But I did appreciate that kind of carried on that general sort of like worry she had for her daughter in the last one, that it's still here. That's a good continuation. That's a good thing that doesn't just feel like a reference for a reference sake. That feels like it's continuing their story as a pair of characters. From one
I think
film
it does
to
a
the
good
next.
job. It does a good job of setting up Phoebe as, you know, she's very smart. Obviously, she's like a super genius pretty much, but she views that as her responsibility. She views that as, like, and that's across movies. She views this as, she's smart enough, she should be doing adult things. And her parents are basically coming down saying, like, you don't have to, though.
Yeah.
Like, you'll have time for that. Try to enjoy yourself for now.
Yeah, I felt attacked because when she's arguing she should be a Ghostbuster, and like both of them go, look, it's only 3 years. We're not saying you can't do it ever, but in 3 years' time, that'll pass by quick, and then you can be a Ghostbuster. And then she says, 3 years is nothing in the span of your life periods. And I'm like, oh God, you're cutting deep. Because, yeah, the truth is, once you hit like around 30 or so, yeah, 3 years starts to feel like nothing. Like, I felt attacked with that line.
Hey, Pete, you just hit episode 400 of the comic show.
I know.
How many years was that ago?
That was 8 years.
How does that feel?
So, but yeah, I mean, obviously 15 to 18 feels like an eternity when you're that age. But yeah, in hindsight, 3 years is absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So, no, this is why it's such a shame to me that as the movie goes on and it gets into more of its other side characters and plots, that a lot of this family drama just kind of goes by the wayside. And it's like, it's not forgotten. Like, obviously they pay off some little things later, but it does kind of feel like it starts to be more of a background plot than it does the central thing, which is a shame.
I mean, I still think the family drama, yes, I think the family drama takes a backseat, but I think that all of the setup that this family drama did for Phoebe's story, Phoebe is very much the front and center, like her arc, her like what she wants to do and be in here. That's very much, I would say, the main thrusting plot here until we get to the third act.
No, it absolutely is. And it was in the last movie as well, but this movie has so many more characters and side plots that it means we get, we still get a good amount of the other main characters last time. This time, it's all diluted because we've got all these other characters. We haven't talked about the English guy who's like the repairman Ghostbuster. We'll talk about him in a minute.
Whatever that was.
I do appreciate the idea that there's a different division. I mean, the fact that Winston's secretly done it and not told them that he's done it's a bit weird, but whatever. Like, there's a secret division, or a separate division, that is, like, for maintaining the equipment and, like, doing, like, the research, like, tied to the ghosts. But really, okay, it's great that you've got some people that are going out and catching them, but what about all the... Because it's basically like in The Conjuring, like, the Warrens have that room with all the possessed objects. They basically have like a lab, which is like that, where they're sort of trying to take the ghosts out of the objects and like trap them and stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. I appreciate that their logo is the Ghostbusters logo, but the red sensor sign's like a cog, just to differentiate it. I'm like, oh, you know what? That makes sense. That's another toy, but I don't feel like you've like cheapened this by having that. That feels like a natural alternative version of the logo to me.
Yeah, no, it feels. There's so many things that it's like kind of reminding me of, but I can't nail any one of them down. I think the one that jumps like the most to mind is Men in Black.
Sure.
In that, just that idea of like, you get this core little thing of like, oh, this idea of like government agents going in, fixing things, whatever. But then it expands out and you see just how like far reaching this really becomes. I like that idea that, yes, it started out as Ghostbusters, but then different things came up. You need like a custodial crew. You need a mechanic crew. You need a investigatory.
Hell,
and I like how it comes down to that.
At a certain point, you need like a boring floor of the building, which is the accountants and the HR department.
That's where Louis Tully's been hanging out this whole time.
Yeah, Rick Moranis is the one. Actually, Sigourney Weaver's not in this. This is the first Ghostbusters movie that Sigourney Weaver's not been in at all.
Very shocking. I was waiting for her to show up in like an end credits and then just nothing.
Nah. So yeah, I mean, so they've set up all this stuff with Phoebe not being allowed to go out, and they get a call, they go out to a call, and they leave her behind, right? I do think it'd have been funny to just cut and see, like, I didn't want a full story of what each ghost busting thing was. I just like the idea of we're following Phoebe, we're doing her plot, and then maybe in the middle, and maybe a funny moment because it'll like clash with something she said. It cuts to like their like what the mission is, and it's just like one of the characters like covered in like black goo or something, and like just the implication that they're having this crazy adventure just off camera that we're not seeing or something. It would be funny.
I think it wouldn't make it funny. It would make it a lot more like heart-wrenching, I would think. But I kind of wanted a scene where they do whatever they have to do. They, zap the ghost, get them trapped or whatever in a public place, like a park or something. And Phoebe can just hear the crowd cheering.
Oh,
you know?
okay, yeah.
Can just hear like, oh, they had this super fun, cool thing. Everyone's clapping for them, and then I'm stuck here doing whatever.
Yeah, so her plot here, she goes to the park to play chess, which I did think, because it's night time, and I thought, a lot of 15-year-olds like hang about on their own in Central Park at night in New York. That feels a bit sketchy.
Yeah, Central Park in New York is totally the safest place in America. Yeah. What are you talking about?
I feel like this feels a bit dangerous. But she's
in fairness, I don't think this is Central Park. I think this may just be some other random park.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. Like that makes some sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I'm clicking on an actor because I really recognize this ghost that pops up.
Oh yeah.
And I can't tell you for the life of me what I know her from, which is bugging me. Like she almost looks Babysitter 2. I saw that. She's in that.
Okay. All right.
And
I'm looking here.
And 1. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. That's what I know her from. Babysitter 1 and 2.
I have no idea what I know her from. Maybe it's a TV thing. She's in a lot of TV stuff, but I definitely recognize her as well. She definitely has one of those faces that's just like, oh yeah, you, okay.
So yeah, Phoebe's in the park playing. She puts out the chess pieces like she's going to just like, I don't know, spar against herself, and then the pieces start moving. You're thinking, wait, tell me they're not bringing Egon back. He went beyond. He was done. And then this random girl ghost pops up. And she's like, boo, and Phoebe just like shrugs it off, and then she's like, wait, why are you not scared? Why are you not running away? He's like, I'm not scared. Let's just play chess.
I'm sorry, you must not know who I am. Hi, Ghostbuster. Moving on.
Ah, dear. Yeah, so this plot is super frustrating to me for multiple reasons. I like the idea that she befriends a ghost, and like, there's definitely arguments for and against why maybe that's a bad thing, or maybe why that's like a weird thing she shouldn't be doing, and perhaps whatever the outcome to that argument could be. But I think for me, the big problems with this is that they sort of like hit on a couple of things. The next time she shows up, or maybe the third time she shows up, which is actually at the firehouse, and she's like looking around at different things, and she sees the ghost traps and whatnot and the containment unit, and there's almost like a moment where like Phoebe's like almost having to like not apologize, but like sort of like, oh, I wouldn't do that to you, like, like this idea that, oh, maybe not all ghosts should be trapped kind of thing. I thought that's a really interesting question to bring up and a theme to it, because obviously Egon didn't need to be trapped in the last movie either. Obviously there's just people ghosts who are just, they have some unfinished business, and they'll not going to hurt anyone, and then they'll move on, and that'll be it. And I thought that was a really interesting question that just even that one little scene kind of raised. And then I was really sad that it didn't do anything else with it, or even mention it in any way, shape, or form for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there, and I do think that is something that should have been explored more, is this idea of, because I think she basically keeps, by the way, the ghost name is Melody.
Yes, Melody.
We get this thing where she keeps Melody essentially a secret from everybody else. Whenever anybody like walks in and is like, oh, Phoebe, what are you doing? Melody just teleports away, and Phoebe doesn't tell them what's going on.
Which actually, on that secret thing, I also thought they were maybe doing like she's got a crush on her kind of thing. Maybe they're going to set up that.
200% thought that's where we were going here. Yeah. I thought this was going to be like, because especially, I mean, we'll get to it, but at a certain point here, Phoebe goes to extraordinary measures just to be able to like physically interact with Melody.
I thought they were going to kiss when that happened. We'll get to that.
Yeah, that was absolutely where I thought it was going. So by the end of the movie, and I don't know, it felt like one of those things where Sony just didn't want to pull the trigger. They didn't want to be like, yes, our main character is 15-year-old and to some extent queer, but like, it's so telegraphed. It's so 100% there that I felt like they just needed to do it.
It felt like it was building to it. It felt like, oh, it's kind of poignant that her first love potentially someone who's already dead, and then it's going to be sad when she has to move on. But it also felt like, she's about the age that it makes sense. She's maybe just discovering that about herself. Maybe because she is such like a science nerd, she's not really thought about, sex and romance and
like any sort of physical attraction or anything like that.
And this is maybe like a first time kind of experience for her. I felt it was like going down that path as well. And I thought the whole reason why she, so there's this machine. It's basically the machine that takes out the ghosts from the objects that are possessed. Right, and they set this up earlier. We'll go back and talk about a lot of this, but she puts herself in it. Right, Phoebe puts herself in this box, and goes to turn it on, and the idea being is it'll pull out her ghost, so she's existing on the same plane of existence as Melody, and they can interact for a couple of minutes, and then she'll snap back to her body. Now, my first problem with this is that it felt like it didn't set up enough for me why she felt so confident doing this, because it felt really dumb. This felt like a scientist in Prometheus doing something stupid like taking her helmet off. This felt like, are you sure this is safe to eject your spectral form out of your body and you're convinced it's going to go back in? Like, yeah. And even and if it's not, then that's fine. But just at least let me feel like the movie's telling me the movie knows this is super dangerous. So this is something that her parents, like her mom, is going to be pissed about when she finds out she did this. Like, this was so dangerous. This is the equivalent of, like, you know, in real world, like a teenage girl riding on a motorbike without a helmet and going down like a steep hill or something. I don't know. Like, pick some crazy thing.
The equivalent of, I mean, if we're talking about like other sci-fi-ish movies, this is the equivalent of that plan from the Abyss of, like, I'm gonna let you drown and then revive you. Like, it's stupid dangerous.
Except in that case, that was the only option. That was like they're forced into that there.
Yeah. And this is just for the sake of, like, I want to touch a girl I think is pretty.
Yeah, that's so. That's
well, no, I want to say I agree with you though, in that there's a conversation where they specifically say, like, oh, have you tried it on biological things? And the English guy says, no, we haven't yet. And then there's nothing else between that scene to this scene, and she's just super confident it'll work. So yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah, that's problem number one. Problem number two is the fact that as soon as she does this, Melody says sorry, because earlier on it teased that Melody was hearing that voice, probably the villain from inside the orb, right? Right, that's what they set up early on. And as soon as she comes out as a ghost form, Melody goes, I'm sorry, and the alarms go off, because here's the thing. This entity, right, I swear the name. Garaka. They picked like the most, like, hard to remember name, right? Yeah. Garaka can take control of ghosts. Not humans, but can control ghosts. So now that she's a ghost, and she can, like, say stuff that her body will also say, that'll, like, say the magic incantation that'll let her out, let the Karaka out the orb, and then, you know, that's like that's my problem with this, is that wait, the plan all along was that they knew they could get her to leave her body so they could make her say the magic words. Like, how did they even know that she would have this idea? That is so convoluted to me.
I agree. I agree that this entire sequence here, as much as I really like the ideas that they were trying to set up, because I was just hoping they were going to pull that trigger, they never did. By the time that her eyes get, you know, possessed or whatever, she starts doing the incantation and Melody starts explaining, here's exactly what happened here. I agree. I don't think that it did enough to link what we were presented as exposition to what it was now. We get the different things of Garaka can control ghosts. We get that a certain incantation must be said, but it's only in this scene that Melody specifically says a human has to say the incantation for it to work. And that's where, like, it's still throwing out exposition as it's happening. And I agree wholesale.
Yeah, and not even just that, though. It is heavily implied, if not made explicitly clear, that from the very first second Melody appeared in front of Phoebe, she was sent there by Garaka with the end goal of, like, she's the one you can eventually trick into saying this. And maybe the plan wasn't originally to, like, get her to leave her body so she could be possessed. Maybe the idea was just, oh, you can trick her into saying all the words. But yeah, they never, like, even make it look she's trying to get her to say those things. This just plays like, oh, this was the plan all along, was to make you leave your body. And I'm like, I guess the villain might have known this machine was there because the ball was in that room, and but it still feels so like she didn't even, like, it's not even like Melody suggests, oh, it'd be great if you could exist like me so we could touch or something like that. No?
Did she not, though? Because there's that scene where they're walking down the street together, and they say something, like, maybe it's Phoebe the one who's, like, suggesting it, but, like, they say something very close to that, or at least they start, like, pushing their way towards it.
I don't remember. Yeah, but whatever it was, it didn't feel like enough in the moment anyway. When it hit that scene, I just felt it was so convoluted that it was you know that moment where, like, oh, this was the villain's plan all along. But this all relied on her making this choice, this absurd, dangerous choice that we have already critiqued for saying feels like a really big leap for to make. Yeah. So,
I mean, here's the thing. I am agreeing with you 100% that I feel that there were missing steps to this plan. I think that there were like leaps in logic, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe Garaka could have had all this planned out. It's not explicitly clear in the movie how much of it was Garaka and how much of it was him just going on the fly to being presented with a new situation here. But I think I enjoyed the third act like setup and like what we were doing throughout it enough that I just didn't mind that it took that leap to get there. I think I would have been more annoyed if we took a bunch more scenes just to explain that stuff. Like if we stay with what we already have in the movie and say we can only add things, I can't think of a good way to do that in a non-clumsy fashion.
I mean, I agree with that, but I think that's the point where you say the script is heavily flawed and it should be rewritten to like, you know, a good script puts a lot of these things together in efficient ways. I mean, ultimately, what is storytelling if not telling things in a ways that are efficient, but in an engaging way that makes it compelling? And
that's fair.
I would argue that this is, you know, outside of that boundary. Let's go back though, because we've skipped over a bunch of stuff because we wanted to jump to the end of the melody stuff, because we've got the whole, you know, Phoebe's benched, but she's I can't remember what sends her on the path to work with Ray. So, what sets that up?
Well, the first time that she's benched, she just goes around town. She goes to visit Ray. We get that Ray is doing a podcast where random people bring in supposedly haunted stuff to be investigated with the PKE meter. And then as they are...
Oh, yeah, that's right. We didn't even talk about why Podcast's there. Podcast shows up at Ray's place, and he's helping him filming this YouTube show. And I was like, wait, you're just in New York? Why would you be here as well? And to be fair, they do give you an answer. I don't know if I think it's a good answer, but they give you an answer. They say that he lied to his parents about that they think he's at space camp when he actually wants to be here for the summer helping Ray, because they set up at the end of the liked his podcast, so now they're best buddies making content together.
That sounds really familiar.
Yeah, but I'm not like 50 years older than you, so it's not creepy.
Yeah, you're definitely not the creepy older man in this relationship.
No, really, really weird. And the mini puff marshmallows are there as well.
Okay, can I just I get it, movie. I understand. You made a cute little thing and you have so many toys left over in your warehouse and you just want to sell them all. I get it. I understand you, but you went too hard on the Stay Puft Mini Marshmallow Man, okay? You just trim it back too much.
Yeah. But anyway, Kumail Nanjiani comes in with the orb. It's a bunch of jokes about how he just wants money for it. He keeps upping the price. The more Ray looks interested in what he's looking at, the more he's like, oh no, I think it'll be $60 this time.
Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, I can't part with it without 30. And he's like, wow, is this an actual orb? He's like, yep, for $50.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't have a problem with this scene on its own because, honest to God, I thought this was the only scene that he was in. I thought he was the guy who was dropping this off to get the orb into Ray, and then he was just going to disappear from the plot.
That's what I thought. And then, I mean, I guess we'll stick to him for a little bit. Maybe not his whole thing, but just basically, it's like, okay, you got this from his grandmother's place, and then once they take the orb into the Ghostbusters lab, right, where they're testing all this stuff.
Well, because he turns the PKE meter on it when he's buying it, and it managed to send a shudder of huge energy out all the way to the firehouse and causes problems all over there.
Yeah. Which, by the way, on the PKE meter, I did actually kind of like the YouTube show scene. Not all of it, but I did like that this woman puts out her dead husband's watch and she's like, oh, I think it's possessed. And then Ray pulls out the PKE meter and they just sit there for 15 seconds and it does nothing. Yeah. That was at least a little funny to me. It was like, okay, there's obviously still just not shams, but there's false positives. Okay, yeah. there's not
everything is a ghost.
Yeah, so whatever. Anyway, so once they've investigated a little bit in this English guy who's working for Zed Winston, I almost said Zed Mordley. The way I say his last name.
You're right, both. Yeah,
I'm looking for the guy's name. Pinfield, that was his name, the English guy.
Yep.
So Penfield, he comes in to fix the containment unit when it acts up. It's tied to when the orb, like when the PKE meter was looking at the orb, it sent like a ripple through the ground or something to the Ghostbusters building, and there's like a sort of hole in the wall of forming around the containment unit.
And this is after when they unload the sewer dragon, they have some real trouble getting it unloaded because they're realizing like, hey, all of the ghosts from the 80s and everything we've been doing recently, they're still in there. What's the storage capacity on this thing?
Yeah, which is why Winston shows them this new ghost lab, which not only has all these scientists experimenting with the ghosts, and they have ghosts trapped in some cells, which have the same tech as the proton packs, or as the traps more specifically, like sort of on the surroundings, so they're trapped in there. But there's also a supersized containment unit. It's like 10,000 times bigger, storage wise.
I think they said something along the lines like it's the size of the like American Northwest or something like that. Like it's massive
in terms of ghosts. Yeah, obviously not in physical space. So that's how they set all that stuff up. So because they look at this orb and like, okay, where did you get this? It's really freaky. It almost froze Penfield's hand off. Which, by the way, also Lucky's here. She's interning at the Ghostbusters lab. And this was like, after the podcast reason for him being around, it got to Lucky, and I'm like, oh, come on, movie. Like,
they don't even bother. They have Finn just being like, Lucky, hey, Lucky. And he's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, you didn't give up reason. What are you talking about?
Here's the thing. So they're happy to see each other. I'm like, oh, okay. So we've just been killing time with Finn up until this point, right? Or Trevor, I should say. Now that Lucky's here, they had a thing in the last movie. Clearly, they'll have maybe a little subplot together, or their relationship will advance by the end of the movie. Like, other than the scene, which we're about to talk about, where they go to Kumail Nanjiani's like apartment, and they crack some jokes together, I feel like they don't even interact for the rest of the movie. They do nothing with either of these two characters. It's wild how little there is for either of them.
I mean, with what we have in the movie, there's nothing for them to do. Like, there is the fact that they put Lucky in as an intern here, I felt like was already ham-fisted just to get her to be a part of the plot, because again, nobody from Oklahoma has any reason to be here.
And and it's not that I don't like her, but I think her and podcasts are such easy cuts, right? They're just easy cuts because there's no reason for them to be here. It was just an excuse to have them back, and it just bloats the cast out. I
mean, the fact that we get the addition of Kumail and Penfield here, you cut two characters, bring in two characters, there you go. Your cast is now essentially equal sized.
Yeah, I mean, it's not apples to apples because the original Ghostbusters, at least Ray and Winston, have a lot more sort of things to do. They're a bit more involved in the plot in their own ways, which do feel more natural, to be fair. I do think their roles in this, where Ray actually does want to investigate things. I appreciate that Winston tries to tell Ray at one point, hey, you're an old man now, like, why do you really want to go and have vacations, go be retired? And he's like, no, I love this shit. This is what I care about. And I'm like, you know what? That sounds like Ray, because he did care about this shit. All the way back in Ghostbusters 1, he cared about finding this stuff. That's why he's got fancy terms for every type of ghost, because he was already cataloguing them in his mind long before he ever actually saw one. So I'm like, that makes sense, right? That's all fine. Anyway, so I want to get to this scene, because they go to... It's Penfield, it's Trevor, and... Lucky, right? So the two teens, well, they're not teens in it. Well, he's still a teen, technically. He's 18. But like so the young adults in Penfield go to his place, and he's just a typical dude bro with these big TV and video games for the most part. Yeah. And there's some like exposition that he fires out about, the grandmother left me the place, so and so he doesn't really talk to his dad, but none of it really matters except the fact that he found that stuff, particularly the orb, in a secret room that he didn't know about at the back of the apartment, which, he only found after she died. Yeah. And they go in, and it's the fancy like brass outfits there, and there's like stuff all over the walls and whatnot, and they make some jokes because there's some chains, so they make some jokes about it being a sex dungeon, which was mildly amusing. I'll give them that. I
could not fully appreciate that scene because I was in a packed theater, and there was like a 6-year-old sitting next to me, and I was like, I'm not sure how this is gonna fly here.
I think it mildly amused me just because it for the one time in the whole movie, it felt like Trevor and Lucky were actually okay. I can actually kind of see why they actually are friends because of the way they're bouncing these jokes back and forward with each other. Because they sort of like say, oh hey, there's no echo in here. It's like a dead zone in terms of audio. And then Lucky's like, yeah, so no one could hear what she was doing, and they're cracking jokes, and that's making Kumail uncomfortable. He's like, can we stop making sex jokes about my dead grandmother, please? But all this is to say that it turns out his grandmother was the fire master. Was it master? I think it was fire master.
I think it is. That sounds right.
Basically, okay, the first big problem with this is that it's clearly just their version of Keymaster and Gatekeeper, right?
Right.
It's just a new version of that. That's problem number one. But the main thing here is that she was this like natural opposite to this Frozen Empire Garaka fellow, because she was a flame bender. So we'll get into it more when we talk about the third act. But Kumail Nanjiani's character ends up being someone who has natural superpowers that can fight ice.
Okay. Here's the thing. When you present me the concept of Ghostbusters, my suspension of disbelief, what is being asked of me is, you have to believe that ghosts are real,
yes,
and that they can be scientifically interacted with. And I said, all right, movie, you have that.
That's the premise. If you don't have that, then you may as well not watch it.
I give you that free of charge. But the fact that it takes a good, I'd say half the movie, to then introduce the fact that, hey, yeah, ghosts are real, cool, whatever. But then there is also just a normal human chain, a normal, like, we've had this family tree where they are able to control fire. Has nothing to do with like a ghost possessing them or being near or anything like that. It's just a thing that they can do.
Yeah, there's also some backstory here, and this is the reason for the brass, is that back in the, like, well, I don't know, caveman days, I guess.
Yeah, that's always.
Yeah, like brass was a natural container for spirits. So this comes up a little bit later. I didn't hate that as like a little bit of lore. That, you know, back in the day where people were more like open to supernatural stuff, like before you know, science and modern thinking get in the way, that brass was like a natural containment thing. I don't hate that as a concept. But yeah, this line of firebenders, like, it's mildly amusing as like the next scene with them where Bill Murray just shows up like out of nowhere to test them, which I guess the logic here is because he was testing for the ESP in the original movie. That was like his introduction, is that he's going to test this guy for any latent abilities he might have. But I'll be honest, I don't think between this scene and anything before it, I don't think they ever made it clear to me that he might have fire powers. Because it wasn't until towards the end of this scene where I went, oh, I get what they're doing. They're checking to see if he's got fire powers like his grandmother. But I don't know if they set that up for me enough.
So there was a sequence when he's leaving the shop after dropping off the stuff. He gets like $100 bill and just runs out. They hold on him on the street, and in the background,
you're right. Yeah.
Like a dude who's got like a hibachi grill, and like the flames are a little bit out of control. But I didn't piece that together, and I completely forgot it was a thing at all.
No, when that happened, I read that as it's just tied to whatever happened with the orb, because the orbit just went weird and affected a bunch of stuff. I thought it was just an after effect of that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the only setup you get to that at all. And I mean, I don't think we need to have setup of saying that he has powers before we get to the reveal that he has powers, like, officially.
Well, I think at the very least, I think what I needed was like, for one of the characters to be like, I was right. Like, just to give me that, like it never even felt like they set up the idea that they wanted to test him for something. It just cut to them testing him, and then by the end, there's a Bunsen burner behind him going wonky.
They specifically put him in the dead room, and they're just like, oh, well, maybe this room it was built that way so that sound doesn't get out. And then they just look at him, and then all of a sudden he's being tested. It feels like there's a missing step there. It feels
like at the end of that scene when they look at him, like, we, the audience, should understand why they're looking at him, like, oh, maybe there's something to him. But they've not set it up enough where I actually get that. Again, it feels like at least a scene or two. Like a scene where they talked about, like, maybe what his grandmother might have been, so that once they established that she definitely was that, oh, maybe it's been passed down, like, just something to you know, give you a link.
And it's not until a later sequence when we go and meet Patton Oswalt that we actually get the full backstory of, ice ghost and fire masters, and they fought against them and all that.
I mean, that's pretty much what I want to talk about next. There is a scene with what's her face?
Melody?
No,
Phoebe?
Phoebe. Well, Melody's there eventually. It's Phoebe and Podcast answer a call on their own because the others are out answering a different call. And there's not much of this. Only just they go to a diner and she's going to blast Phoebe, but then doesn't because.
Yeah, because she's like, oh, that's the pretty ghost that I want to kiss. I mean,
yeah, it was almost funny actually because there's a scene where she asks Ray, like, "Hey, have you ever wondered what it's like to be a ghost?" And all I could think was, no, what you really want to ask him is, have you ever thought about, screwing a ghost? Because he has. That's like a scene in the first movie. He was dreaming of having sex with a ghost.
That's why he replied every day.
Yeah, so I think about it.
There was a missed opportunity here, I thought, where the rest of the family goes out on a call. Melody's left on her own. She's pissed off about it, and the phone rings. And I just wanted her to go, because she's pissed off, to go out and answer, "Ghostbusters, what do you want?" And she didn't. She just answered it with like a hello.
Yeah. That was there was an opportunity there. I agree. It felt weird that she didn't just answer like a receptionist or like the Ghostbusters receptionist. Actually, it reminds me of a joke that I did like. I think I don't know if it's when they leave for the first call where she goes to the park, or when they leave for this call where she goes to the diner with Podcast. One of the two, when they get the call just before they go. There's a moment where Phoebe is getting a bit shitty as a teenager and basically says to her mum, "Hey, you've got the last name Spengler, but if you didn't, Paul Rudd, he is a scientist who studied things. It makes sense that he's a Ghostbuster, but you," and then Carrie Coon's like, "Be very careful what your next words are." And then it just smash cuts to them going downstairs, Carrie Coon and Paul Rudd, and Paul Rudd's like, "Man, I didn't even know she knew any of those words." Like, it just implies that instead of saying the mean thing about her not being qualified or being too dumb, turned into something foul and like, "Oh, you're going to test me? You're going to test me, Mum? I'm dropping a C-bomb on you then."
I think it was worse than that. I think we got several. I think she went through the whole alphabet of bombs. So yeah, no, I like that scene. And then like you're saying, it goes to the Melody thing where she's just hanging out in a diner, and then that leads directly into the sequence where Melody shows back up at the firehouse and is like, "Hey, how's it going?" And she's like, "Oh, do you want to come in and like see my place and whatnot?" And this is like wholesale where it really starts coming down on this idea that Phoebe really likes Melody and like wants something more to come out of that. And I forget exactly how the scene ends, but it basically ends with Melody heading down a street later on, and then you hear
the voice,
the voice saying like, it's all gibberish, but Melody's responses are basically saying like, "I'll do it, but does it have to be her?" Showing that she does care about Phoebe, but clearly she's wrapped in some big evil plot.
Yeah, and then Phoebe, she has the conversation with Ray about, being a ghost and all that, and that scene leads to them being like, "Hey, these are like, the type of words that are, on here. We got this recording from the orb with the saying these words. What is this?"
This is at the library with Patton Oswalt.
Well, they're about to go to the library. I'm saying they set this up with her. He says, "Wait, aren't you benched?" And then she's like, "Aren't you retired?" And then it's like that sort of motivates them both to be kind of troublemakers, which reveals the Ecto-C, which is the bike and sidecar, which just looks like a white bike and sidecar. There's not much to it. Obviously, later on we find out there's a hidden proton pack in the sidecar, but that's for later. Which gets me to like, so one of the few things that was not in the trailer that was like a nostalgia thing that did make me groan here. I knew we were going back to the library because the lion statues were in the trailer.
Oh yeah,
but the actor, the goddamn like administrator of the library, whoever he is, comes out, and I'm like, that's the guy. That's the guy who was told to back off.
Here's the thing, I don't remember him. Like I have no memory of this character, but the only reason I know that he was a thing is because they held on him for that extra second. They gave him that extra second, and they even had Ray be like, "Oh, good to see you again," before they move inside anyway.
Yeah. And then it was in the trailer, but I forgot about it. But it really annoyed me after seeing that librarian was seeing the library ghost. and I was like,
right,
why is she even randomly here? And I suppose in my head I did sort of justify it slightly by saying, well, they caught her before, the end of Ghostbusters 1, and all the ghosts get let out at the end of the movie, so she came back to the library, I guess. But it's still...
Did they catch her at the end of Ghostbusters 1? That was the library ghost. That's where they get scared and just run out.
Oh, that's true, yeah. To be fair, yeah, they never did catch her, you're right. Okay. Yeah. So I guess it makes sense that she's still here. I still don't like that they forced this moment in here, though. No. Especially when it did the exact same stream to Dan Akroyd.
Yeah. No, if they introduced her and then had her do something else, or even had Ray react to her in a different way, fine, I could accept it. But it is the exact same shush jump scare, and that's
it.
Just play the original scene at that point then. Like, don't do this again.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Patton Oswalt's there with the exposition. He's like, oh, this is an ancient language. This predates all these other things. Oh, let's talk about it. Here's some carvings in a cave that explain the story of the fire powers and the orb and the demon.
I mean, do you want me to run through this super quick?
If you want to give them some detail,
I can do it. So, lore-wise, there was an ancient emperor who had an ancient wizard. And the ancient wizard had ice powers. Yeah, stupid.
There's an ancient emperor with an ancient wizard. That's just something you said. Okay.
Yeah, it's what the movie said. So he was trying to build up his empire, but then one day the emperor realized, like, oh, hey, my wizard, he's got plans for, like, world domination via the undead. So we're just going to take him out. But they were unable to, and it looked like he was going to take over the world until 4 fire masters showed up, and they used their fire powers to seal him inside of this big brass ball, and it has been their charge to watch over this ball and make sure that he does not escape, lest he will raise his undead army to take over the world again. Also, he apparently has the whole thing with ice is apparently like they took the phrase "chills down your spine" literally, of it scares you so much that you freeze to death.
Which doesn't seem that important when he's literally just freezing everything anyway. Why do you have to add that element? Also, they make a big deal about how his horns are the main source of his power, and they took the horns off, and they do a whole thing later where once he is out, after the words have been spoken by Phoebe, he goes straight to like the apartment and gets the horns. And all I could think was, why did you set up that he needs the horns for his power if he was just going to go and get them immediately? Like, it's just an extra step that didn't matter. Like, it's not like they had a chance to stop him before he got the horns, and then it's like, okay, they try to stop him, oh no, they fail, and he's got his horns, so now he's even more powerful for the finale. They don't do that. He just goes and gets the horns immediately, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that there was an extra step.
I mean, honestly, it just felt to me like they wanted to have that visual of him putting the horns back into his head. That's the only reason I could think it mattered at all.
Because he's horny. I can't crack that joke, because Bill Murray effectively cracked that joke when he shows up.
He does,
yeah. So they end up chasing through the library because a ghost possessor ends up coming out, because they listen to this old audio from the turn of the century, and the ghost sort of possesses it and then possesses a trash bag, so the trash bag's kind of like jumping through the library, and they're chasing it outside, and then it transitions from the trash bag to the lion statue, so we get this whole sequence. And this is where the proton pack pops out, and we get the blast and all that. Yeah.
And they destroy the lion, and that's what finally sets Walter Peck over the edge to say, like, you destroyed a national monument.
The cops all come in and like arrest them for creating the big disturbance and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think out of this movie, my favorite ghost is actually the possessor ghost, because it's so simplistic in like what it does, to the fact that where it's just a little red electric bolt that we never actually see the true shape of. It just jumps from object to object. And I like this thing where they set it up earlier on as it's one of the ghosts that's being studied in the ghost lab, or whatever you want to call it. And then they do take the time to show, like, here's how it escapes, here's how it joins in with the rest of the group, and then eventually becomes this lion. I think that this, even better than like Slimer, who we will get to, I guess, in a little bit, is set up as just a fun idea. And because of what it is, it can't be a toy. Like, it's done strictly for the purpose of the movie. And I think that's great.
Or everything it possesses can be a toy.
Look, if Sony's going to try to convince me that a vacuum cleaner is a Ghostbusters toy, then so be it.
I think it's a fun idea. It's a nice simple concept, and they get a little creative with it later on. I think it's almost such a good idea that you could effectively do a whole movie about this possessing ghost.
Yeah,
like it could be like a comedy version of The Thing, where like, oh, you never know where the ghost is or who it's or what it's possessed now. Like, you know, and the objects get more dangerous and lethal as the movie goes on, kind of thing.
There was a video game genre pretty much called Prop Hunt, maybe like 5-10 years ago, where the whole concept of the game is just you can transform into like things that are in the environment, and you basically have to hide and not get caught by people. I would love just to see a Ghostbusters episode of that TV show we were talking about that's just 100% that. And like I can imagine the final scene, they're essentially in like the warehouse from Indiana Jones, and it's just okay. Well, we're screwed now.
Yeah. So after this incident, they're at this police station. Obviously, the mum and dad are pissed that she did this. This was like, okay, this is the whole you made a mistake, but we expected something to, you know. Actually, no, that comes a little bit later. That's after the whole.
Yeah, that's after she kills herself.
That's after she technically kills herself. Here they're actually just pissed because later on they're actually, okay, we're not angry at you this time. We're actually just really concerned and are glad you're okay because you actually scared the shit out of us. But here they're pissed at her, and Walter Peck comes storming in and says, okay, that's it. The Ghostbusters are done. This gives me the reason that all your proton packs have been confiscated. Your building's going to be taken. Like, all of it's gone, and I'm going to get that car too. And just to jump in with a point here about the movie as a whole, this has no meaning because when they need proton packs, Winston just rolls up with some new proton packs, and it's not even an issue. This is not an obstacle that actually has to be solved. It's just, no, there's already other proton packs.
Viewing it much more cynically, this is the idea of like, we're gonna sell you guys some new toys because your proton packs are outdated.
Which I would be fine with if they presented it as like, oh no, for a while they have to struggle without them, but they never do. Like, as soon as we have to actually do stuff, they already have new stuff, so it doesn't really matter. But the big thing here, again, this is the second time we've done this, so it's almost a running gag, is that it'll sort of like cut on a cliffhanger before Phoebe says something, and then what it cuts to reveals that she said something much worse than what you probably thought she was going to say.
Yeah, that's the thing. She doesn't get arrested by Walter Peck. She doesn't like actually go to jail. But he says like, "Oh, I'm a public official. You better watch your next words out of your mouth."
Yeah, she kind of threatens him. Yeah, it's like, "Hey, you can either what was it? Either apologize or go to jail or something like that." That was the choice. And then it cuts on her like almost about to say something, and she's like in handcuffs, and like Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon walk in and go, "We really thought you were going to say you're sorry," or whatever the exact word was, but I think it was she'll behave. I think that was the line.
That's it.
It's like, oh, we thought you were going to say you were going to behave. So it's like, okay, it settled it up. That's all fine. And
that's
then
where Paul Rudd finally comes down and like snaps at her and basically says like,
tells her off.
No, you've been selfish as hell, and now you've affected all of us with your actions. So think about what you did. In
the small slither that like Carrie Coon and Paul Rudd might be fully fleshed out characters, there's one scene here where Carrie Coon's packing because she thinks this is all over, and Paul Rudd convinces her to stay by mostly just quoting the theme song. But and it's a nice enough little goofy scene, but I'm like, yeah, like I almost want more of like why this group, or obviously there's a reason why three of them are going to stick together, but I mean like just like almost more of this, like, okay, actual like making a commitment to fight for this and believing in it, and that they're here, and this is like a thing that they both really want to do, particularly again Callie, because she wasn't as into it in the last movie.
I think that this is the point where just a tiny little editing shift would make this better, in that they don't have the major threat at this point. So there is no ostensible reason besides we just like being Ghostbusters for them to stick together. At this point in the first two movies, by the time they were told like you can't be busting ghosts anymore, the big threat was already there. It was present. That's
a very good point. If effectively they were just going to leave, right, and like he couldn't convince her, and then like the bad stuff starts to happen, and then that's what motivates her to say, no, we're freaking Ghostbusters, we're going to go save the city. That would be I mean, it's a bit cliched, admittedly, because it's what a lot of action movies do, but it's like, oh, we were almost about to abandon this, and then the call to action comes, and they go, no, this is what we are, we're going to save the day. It's not super original, but it would add more weight to her making that choice, as opposed to here, where he just kind of goes, who are they going to call? And she's like, Ghostbusters, they're going to call us. Okay, I'll stay. Like, it's a whole...
I mean, again, like you said, I don't mind the scene. I think the scene is well enough done, but it does feel like it's trying to play it for stakes, but there are none. There is absolutely no problem if they don't stay Ghostbusters.
I like it because I like the chemistry between them, and I like the family dynamic, but it's also frustrating because it feels like just the tip of what we're supposed to be getting at this point with these characters, because we're spending so much time with all these other plots, you know. I think before we move on to the third act properly kicking off, let's just go back and talk about the two scenes with Slimer. Slimer's in the attic.
That's literally, you just said it. You did it. There you go. Slimer's in the attic, and that's it. That's all we do.
And Finn Wolfhard's like, he goes down and says, "Mom, there's like a thing in the attic," and she's like, "Well, you're an adult now, right? You said you're 18. You deal with it," which is mildly amusing. And he's like, "All right, fine." And then he goes up and it's Slimer. And I think one of the things that irks me, and it works in Ghostbusters more than it does some other things, but when he gets slimed and he just sort of goes, "Yep." That annoys me because it's that little self-referential tinge of like, yeah, I'm in a movie and a crazy thing just happened, so I'm just going to be ironic about it.
It felt like it. I didn't watch the trailers. It felt like it was in the trailers.
It is definitely in the trailer. Yes. Yeah. In fact, it might even be the last shot of like one of the trailers. Like it's the last moment.
There you go. The Slimer stuff pays off. I mean, if we're just gonna wrap it up real quick, once everything starts going to hell, we find out the Possessor Ghost is under Garaka's like thrall, is working for him, and it takes over a proton pack, and then we'll deal with how to get it out of the proton pack, but then it possesses a pizza, and as it crawls away, Slimer just eats it, and then that's it. Slimer's gone. And
Trevor goes, "Hey, I know that guy," and that's it. That's Trevor's entire plot for this movie. That's it.
I know that guy. That's a hell of a claim to fame there.
So yeah, all right. So we already talked about Melody, kind of tricking Phoebe into becoming a ghost out of her body, and then says the words, which releases Garaka.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to bring up here, though, I don't think we mentioned about Melody, but Melody died as a consequence of she burned in like a tenement fire or something, and so she constantly has these flames coming off of her.
Yes.
And then she also has this motif of she's got like a match with a single match left, and she...
Is it implied by the end that she accidentally started the fire and it killed like everyone?
I feel like it was.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what it was saying, and that she was like upset about that. But here's the bigger theming idea, is that obviously this whole movie, there's a reason they picked that Robert Frost poem at the beginning, is that it's the battle of fire and ice. It's this idea that neither of them inherently are good or bad, but both of them are awful when they are out of control. They are things that are like need to be contained and need to be like their own specific things. And I think that I like the idea that this plays on that, of saying that, you know, Melody and her whole thing is fire out of control. The Garaka's is ice out of control. But then you get the idea of like the Fire Masters being the controlling element, the more like being able to take control of that sort of thing. And with all the control aspects as well, I feel like that's also kind of playing on what Phoebe's plot is, especially by the point where she just decides, yeah, I'm going to kill myself, theoretically, in order to hang out with my girlfriend. And that's
temporarily.
But she's out of control in that way. And her temper stuff as well. I think it does a good job of bringing that to a surface here, of showing like what happens when you are just 100% fueled by emotions and you don't like think through the consequences of it afterwards.
Yeah, I get it. I even slightly like it. I just don't think the movie's good enough where I wish I could be sitting talking about how it's using themes like that, as opposed to all of the things that make it feel clunky and over-edited and overwritten with too many characters and all the other things. But right, I get what you're saying. So yeah, like Garaka's out. I mean, Lucky shows up at the lab and tries to proton pack him, but the beam just freezes. And one of the things that was in the trailer was that Lucky actually gets properly frozen, like her eye gets frozen at one point in the trailer. And they don't. That's just not here. So I guess this was just extended, and she was in more danger, or something. But regardless, like Garaka goes looking for the Fire Master.
Well, gets his horns, as we said, and then the first thing he does, a la Louis Tully just stumbling around town in the first one, he goes to a vape shop called the Fire Master's Vape Shop. And he's like, "Are you the Fire Master?" And he's like, "Yeah, read the sign." And then just freezes and shatters him.
Yeah. So basically, he's ultimately coming to the firehouse because the containment unit, he wants to release all the ghosts, right? That's the big plan. Also, once he's released, that's when we get all the other stuff from the trailer, which is like, you know, the frozen front coming into the beach.
Yeah, so question.
Okay.
He's in town. Why is this thing over the Atlantic coming in?
Because to freeze that much stuff, you have to pull in all the moisture from somewhere. So it has to come
from the water.
From the water. Okay. That's my theory.
That makes no sense, but okay.
I tried, okay? I tried, but because they wanted a scene where some pretty girl on the beach pulls down her sunglasses and is like, "What's that?"
Again, I remember that trailer. I tried to avoid the trailers, but I saw that one. That just feels like it was for the trailer, especially because none of our main characters are on this beach. It's 100% just to show us like, oh, look at how much chaos he's causing around New York.
It's July and there's ice everywhere. Whoa.
That's the other thing that they keep doing is they keep on saying like, God, this summer sure is a swelter. Wish it would cool down a little bit. And then, oops, day after tomorrow.
So one of the things that's been going on in the back half of the movie is that they've got Kumail Nanjiani like try to practice his flame powers, and there is like a little funny payoff to this where after Garak is out and they've already seen like the effect he's having on everything, they come out of the firehouse and like Podcast is really excited because his role in this movie is basically just to talk to Kumail Nanjiani, sorry, and he's like, "Hey, look, this worked, look," and Kumail Nanjiani like transfers the fire from the lighter onto the candle. But it's like just a little party trick compared to everything going on outside. That it's like, yeah, that's not going to save us. That's like it's like a flicker at best.
I think at this point we already have like Venkman showed up. We've got Janine inside the suit as well. He
just randomly shows up. Yeah, there's a whole suit up scene, and it's before Venkman arrives because he comes in after, already suited up. He just knocks on the door and says, "Hey, can I help? Because I'm Venkman. I'm supposed to be here for the third act. Let me in."
Look, you've got me for 3 filming days. This is the third. Let's get it over with.
Yeah, one of the things in the trailer as well is that there was definitely a scene where like all 4 of the family had the big red jackets with the Ghostbusters logo, and they were on like a roof. And look, there's nothing in the movie that even like feels that they're in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, they do spend some time. I think it's Finn and Lucky spend some time up on the roof. And it doesn't feel like anything's accomplished up there.
No, and if anything, it's just Lucky, I think. Because she's the one who sees the scooter, the little tricycle, sorry, not scooter.
Yeah,
the little tricycle coming down. I was like, oh, Jigsaw's coming to town. Which, you know, fine, whatever. But it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, what was this entire scene that this was from in the trailer? Like, because they're all wearing these red jackets, it's already cold, so it's clearly from the third act somewhere. It makes me think that either something was redone and changed, or there was an entire, like, not subplot, but like another step to the whole plot that they've just cut out completely, the third act.
Yeah, I will say I think it feels a little bit rushed they deal with the possessor ghost, like, as it comes in. That's what that tricycle thing was the possessor ghost getting into the place. I
do think the main set piece of that is that when it takes over the proton pack and it points it at Finn Wolfhard, right, at Trevor, one, I like it because it's like a ghost threatening to blast one of them with a proton pack actually feels really dangerous given we know what it is. Like, you know, it's nuclear power. It's this, you know, radioactive blast. But it's also a nice payoff to, even though I don't really like the whole firebender thing that's going on, it is a good moment just on its own in the vacuum where he looks over and Kumail Nanjiani is just kind of like directing the blast away, which... Although I do question, does that blast count strictly as fire?
if we're going by classical definitions, Earth represented solid things, water was liquid, air was gas. So fire would be any sort of plasma, and I think that counts as plasma.
Okay. The other thing they do here is because they're like, okay, Lucky said her proton pack had no effect on Garaka. So the thing they used in the past to beat him was brass. So Phoebe actually like melts down some of the fire pole because it's like made of brass and like coats all of the parts inside the proton pack in brass, like the main sort of, reactor part. And it's like, okay, her one proton pack might actually be effective against her, or against him, sorry. And they do eventually pay that off, and it's got a different beam. It's got like sort of 3 green beams that are sort of dancing around kind of thing. I was like, okay, that's a fine little bit of setup. I don't mind that. But I agree. I think the third act does feel quite rushed to me, especially after how much time was spent building up to Garaka appearing. Because all he effectively does is walk into the firehouse, and all the final confrontation just takes place there. Like, it's like he doesn't even like almost do anything while he's there, other than just almost freeze everyone to death.
Well, that's the other thing, is that they have everyone, and I mean goddamn everyone, has their proton packs aimed at him. And I think the only one who's sitting out in this is Phoebe, maybe?
She's downstairs. She's down talking to Melody, I think.
Yeah, Melody pulls the ghost portal open and has all the ghosts come out. So, everyone's firing at things. And then as soon as it fails, he just pushes them all against the walls, freezes them solid, and then that's it. And I honestly thought it was everybody. Apparently, Nanjiani got out of it somehow.
Well, they did a whole funny bit where he tries to slide down the pole in his like brass outfit that his grandmother had, and it's like it's very slow and like noisy because it's brass. I mean, it just makes it feel like a lot of the characters aren't that important in the third act, which is really annoying, because like what a smarter script would do is make it feel like, no, it's all, they have to form a plan, and all of them have a role to play in that plan, where there has to be 3 people doing this part, there has to be 2 people doing this part, so on and so on.
Barring the retro Ghostbusters, that's the one thing I think Afterlife did better there, is everyone had a point. Phoebe had her thing, Lucky came in as like the backup, Finn was the one who recognized the power grid issue. Like, everyone had a part to play there, that like our main kids. But then you had the retro Ghostbusters show up, and that's where it felt like they were like, we're just here, moving on.
Ultimately the things that happen here is we get some firebender stuff, we get Phoebe with her proton pack, and then ultimately the big swerve is that Melody jumps in and helps by lighting her last match, that matchbook she's been carrying around, and that gives Kumail Nanjiani the fire to use to manipulate.
Yeah, I guess we should also say the whole reason that Melody has been following Garaka is that she thinks that the only way she's going to be able to move on to the afterlife and be with her family is if Garaka like opens up the tear between the worlds and allows her to go through, because she can't figure out how to move on otherwise. Yeah,
and instead it's saving the world, I guess. That's it.
It's lighting that match. That's all you got to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, the moments here are okay. The best part, honestly, is Phoebe's like got her, her altered proton pack like on Garaka, whilst Firebender's doing Firebender stuff. Again, I don't really like there's a Firebender, but he's doing his thing. But I do like that Carrie Coon jumps in and sort of like helps her, because it's she's clearly struggling to hold the beam, so she jumps in, puts her arms around her and helps her. And it was kind of nice. It was like, as much as I didn't necessarily love all the Egon stuff at the end of the last movie, it was kind of like a nice callback to that, in the sense that once again, like, her family member is jumping in, but now it's her mother who's actually here, that she's... In theory, the plot of this movie should have brought them closer together, because after everything that's happened, like, she's grown up a little bit, she maybe respects her mother a little bit more, and her mother's proving that she wouldn't just be answering the phones if her name wasn't a Spengler, which, she kind of implied earlier. So... like, it's a fine little moment to pay it off. It's maybe just it's too little, I guess, based on everything else the movie's not quite doing right for me to really get into it. But
yeah, I honestly, I think that if it weren't for the fact that she's the one interacting with Paul Rudd, I'd say that if we had to cut another character, Callie would be next on the list. I don't think that there's enough in the movie in terms of her plot to really justify her being there on her own.
Well, it's weird when you say that, though, because, like, if you take her out, then all of the meaningful relationships that Phoebe has are not there either. So I think you do have to have her there. But
that's what I'm saying. She only exists to service other characters. And I don't think that that is enough to justify her existence on her own and give her, like you're saying, this sort of plot where it's showing this bond between the two of them. I don't feel like going from Callie to Phoebe, there was enough of a issue there, you know? It didn't feel like...
Absolutely. Like, it's too thin. I've been saying that the whole goddamn time. Mm-hmm. It's too thin in every single plot. But it's one of the more compelling connections in the whole movie is the family drama stuff. So if you take out her, then I'm like, okay, there's literally nothing left in the movie.
But that's where I think if you look at how we end it with Phoebe calling Paul Rudd dad, this is where he should have stepped up. He should have really earned that title, you know?
I can see that. I think it meant more. I get what you're saying, because he's basically effectively becoming a Spengler by doing that. But I liked it with Carrie Coon doing it more. But again, they just both needed more screen time. They both needed more to do in this overall story. It should have focused way more on that the entire time. I think the problem here at this point is that because you've not given them enough to do, but whereas some of the other characters feel like they're like literally their entire plots feel cuttable, I don't think their interactions with Phoebe are cuttable, either of them. I think they're both important. And it feels like there's a movie there that they want to actually tell. There's a character story they want to do, but it's almost too bogged down with having to be a summer blockbuster and having to have this level of like destruction and chaos by the end. This has to be the threat level. Which is fine, I guess, but it's like, every Ghostbusters has to be the end of the world, when maybe it would be nice just to have a simpler thing to sell. Admittedly, it was probably would have made more sense to make the last one the smaller thing, and then this one should have been bigger because it's the second one and they're established now. But it's an ongoing thing. It's frustrating to me because I would cut out Nanjiani by and large, and I like him as an actor. Like I've liked some of those things he's done.
Oh yeah.
I would cut out Lucky. I would cut out Podcast. I think Venkman can probably go. I at least see how Ray and Winston like give some stuff to the movie. Although to be honest, I probably wouldn't have them be in there at the end unless you were going to do something important with them. Because like I said, all the classic characters do at the end is they all run down into the basement and pull a lever, and it takes the strength of all of them, and that's it. That is all they do. And
because I mean the whole thing is that they basically said like, oh yeah, the ghost thing down there, A, now it's totally empty, B, it's essentially a glorified trap. So let's just pull the lever and the ghost guy will get sucked in there.
They turn it into a big trap, because they tried trapping Garak and it's not big enough. But unless you're going to actually do something meaningful, like maybe Ray goes out, like he dies busting ghosts, because it feels like, hey, that's how he wants to spend his golden years. He wants to die doing this because he loves it. If you actually gave him that moment at the end, that would actually justify why he's there in those final scenes. But for the most part, the classic Ghostbusters, I wouldn't have had them in the third act. I think Ray and Winston's inclusion for the first two acts are fine. It feels relatively natural. Him teaming up with Phoebe when they're both not really meant to be doing this, but they're going to work together as a pair of, scoundrels. That's fine. That makes sense to me. But you didn't need to be in the third act.
Yeah, here's the way that I would remap this, just for this ending bit here. A, Ray has to die. I think that they've already set up this idea. He's getting old. He's thought every day about what it's like to be a ghost. I think that they could take this melody plot of, oh, maybe ghosts could just hang around and they don't have to be like captured or anything like that. Make Ray now just a permanent ghost and he's just hanging around with the crew, as shown in like the final scenes or something like that. And he can be in the ghost lab telling them like, oh yeah, it feels kind of like this or something like that, like giving them insight as a ghost. Second, cut out the firebending thing entirely. Focus all of that time on developing the family plots and reinforcing the brass idea. Make that the central focus on here's what it takes to take down Caracas, because you don't need fire and brass. One of those things should be good enough. Obviously, it gets rid of that idea of like fire and ice being like counterbalances, but I think melody was enough to do that.
Yeah, if you've still got melody, you can still have that thematically. It would still work.
Yeah.
If anything, it would actually strengthen the theme, because it actually muddies it by having this other character who just has magical fire powers. If the only character related to fire is this ghost who's technically working with the villain, but ultimately will be the key to bringing... Admittedly, obviously in the way the movie is right now, she gives fire to the guy who can bend the fire, but so you'd have to rework it. So
she could just do it herself.
Yeah,
like,
whatever.
If there's a ice ghost that can control ice, have the fire ghost control fire. Like, that's easy enough. And then the third thing I would do is Lucky and Podcast. They don't make up enough of the movie. I don't think they need to be cut, but they need to be repurposed. And I think that the much better option here is, I'm not sure what to do with Lucky, probably develop more of a relationship with Finn, but Podcast should be part of this ghost lab. He should be learning more about ghosts that way. I don't think that him having his show with Ray really, like, because it doesn't come up again. It's not like it enforces anything. He can just hang out with Ray and be part of this ghost lab.
Yeah, I would just cut him. I mean, Lucky, I think there's an argument for giving Trevor more of a meaningful plot throughout the movie. If he has her to bounce off of, and they can have their own thing, that's because, you know, like they keep saying, he's 18 now, he's not necessarily one of the kids, he can have his own plot with her. I can see that working, but as it stands right now, I would cut Lucky.
Have Trevor and Lucky be in a full-fledged relationship, and she's just staying out here for the summer with him and has to go back to Oklahoma once school starts.
That would be a more believable reason why she's here.
And then use that to reinforce Trevor and Phoebe's relationship. Phoebe has all these new feelings about Melody and has to ask, like, hey, like, you're in this relationship. What's that like? What does it feel like? Have that then further the Phoebe Melody plot as well as building up this brother-sister relationship, which honestly has gotten zero time across both movies.
Yeah. Basically what we're saying is the script needed several more drafts. It needed to cut things out. It needed to be willing to get rid of things. It needed to be more focused. And I'm okay with the main villain thing being simplified, and I honestly think it would be better if it was simplified, because then we wouldn't have to spend as much time explaining the half of the shit that we have to explain with it, and that time could go to developing both Phoebe's relationship with her mum and with Paul Rudd. I think they're both set up in different ways, and I think that's the reason why I like the mum payoff to helping her at the end, is because like, Phoebe's a little shit to her in this movie. Like, there's definitely room there for that to wrap up a feeling. So anyway, movie ends, they've saved the day, and they come out to like a crowd cheering for them. So it's kind of like the first Ghostbusters, where they're getting some adulation, and it seems like Venkman's enjoying it because we know he does. It seems like Callie and Paul Rudd are both kind of getting into it as well. And I actually kind of like the little joke here with Peck at the end. I just wish that he actually was an obstacle for real during the movie's plot. But the joke being that he's here to shut them down and he's here to get tirade. But then because the cameras are on him and the crowd are all pro Ghostbusters, like, hey, we've got your support, right, Mr. Mayor? And he kind of like chickens out and says, yeah, of course. Yeah, vote for me next time. And then, Ghostbusters theme plays. They get a call, so they all, the new family all jump in the car to go.
This is where Phoebe says, like, something, isn't that right, Dad? I mean, Gary.
Yeah, and he's like, fist pumping and high fiving and being like, "Did you hear it? Did you hear it?" And she's like, "Yeah, I heard it." And I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." So they drive off, and that's pretty much the movie. Yep.
And then, did you stay for post credits or mid credit scene? I should say.
I did see the mid credits. I actually also googled to see if there was one at the end, because the last one had one at the very end as well. It said no, so I didn't stay till the very end.
Neither did I.
But
so if we missed something, so sorry.
But the mid credit scene is just a mini Marshmallow Man.
That's what pissed me off the most. Like, already in this movie, I felt they overdid it on the mini marshmallow things. And then not only do they not, like, they don't focus on any of the Ghostbusters. This is just a random ass truck in the middle of godforsaken nowhere that is a Stay Puft Marshmallow truck, and somehow it gets hijacked by these mini marshmallow men. And that's it. The movie just ends with them now driving a truck away.
What was so sad about it is that, so this truck driver gets out of his truck and we see it's the big, you know, the mini Stay Puft, like, Stay Puft Marshmallow truck, right? It's their delivery truck. I'm like, that's fine, that's in universe. And when it started moving, I thought, oh, it's the possession ghost. This is showing where the possession ghost went, like after Slimer ate it. And I thought, this is just letting us know, oh, that's still out there, you know, going from object to object. It's taking the truck. Because it took the car earlier, so why not the truck? And then it cuts inside the truck, and it's all the mini marshmallow men, like, you know, controlling different parts of it. I'm like, piss off, I hate this.
Here's the thing. I'm of two minds. One, I'm glad that Sony did not try to set up another goddamn sequel. Like, thank you, Sony, you're learning. However, if you don't have an idea for a mid-credit scene, you don't have to make one. Like, you can just end your movie when the credits start. People did that for many years before Marvel existed. You can just do that.
You know what's so funny is that when I searched, you know, is there a post-credit scene, all the results I got were, hey, how the mid-credit scene of Frozen Empire sets up a sequel. And I'm like, how? How does it set up a sequel? It's just a joke scene.
This is actually, when you said that it was the possessor demon, or ghost, that gave me like immediate sequel vibes, because not only do you now have this ghost is in a truck obviously implying that like it's a long hauler sort of thing. This is how you set up Ghostbusters Incorporated, like around the US, different franchises and stuff like that for a sequel. That would be a fantastic idea.
Well,
because it's the Marshmallow Man, I don't give a shit.
Dan Akroyd did say he thinks that they should go international and have like Ghostbusters, which makes sense. Not all the ghosts would be in New York. As much as it's fun to set movies there, there would be ghosts elsewhere.
I'd like to imagine that little Oklahoma town is still completely overrun with ghosts, but nobody's there to take care of it anymore.
No one cares.
Yeah,
no one cares. Also, I'll say the one minor like positive maybe to Slimer randomly being in the attic is at least you could say this is like canonically saying that, yeah, that's why Slimer was there in 2, or not why he was there, but he's still there. Like, he hangs out there. Like, he's been like in the attic of the firehouse for 30 years.
I'm going to say that Slimer is just binge depression eating after seeing how he was treated in 2016. That's my answer.
Yeah, okay. I didn't really believe it, and I was sitting there. I was just, I'm trying to make the best of it. Yeah, I think it's a muddy movie. I think it's a mess of a script. I like what it's aspiring to more than what Afterlife was trying to be. But sadly, I think Afterlife actually succeeding in what it was trying to be, even though I didn't like what it was trying to be. This is more of a mess to me as a movie. I think this is way more shoddy, way more disjointed. Scenes are missing, things are clunky. Characters have nothing to do. There's too many characters, and the main drama bits that I'm actually intrigued by are just not focused on enough or as much as I'd want them to be. It's a frustrating viewing for me.
I mean, I get what you're saying, and honestly, talking about it has brought me down a little bit from where I was at.
Good.
Yeah, great. I hate something more. Fantastic. No, but I think that I'm on the flip side of that. You were saying that you like something where it reaches what it aspires to be, even if you don't like it, more than the alternative.
Well, no, I'm not saying that necessarily. I'm saying from an objective point of view, Afterlife is a better constructed movie than this. It just is. On fundamental levels, it has better pacing. It focuses on the right things at the right times. I don't like what its story is, and I don't like how it treats the original at this like gospel that has to like, you know, honor like every second of the way. And there's jokes that I don't like for sure, but it is absolutely a better constructed movie than this.
And I agree with that, but I think my counter is I had so much more fun with this one. Like the last one, like you were saying, I forget whether it was you or Tim who originally said it, but like they forgot Ghostbusters was a comedy.
That was Tim. That was a Tim line.
That was Tim. Yeah. So I felt that as I was watching Afterlife, and because of that, I wasn't really having fun with stuff because every single time something happened, it was with this saccharine lens of like everything that you remember from your childhood is perfect and we're never going to touch it in any way. Going into this one, they had new lore. They had new things they were trying out. Whether I liked all of it, of course not. I think the firebending thing was stupid, but I was able to have more fun because this movie didn't take itself so seriously with the mantle it was handled. It just did a story and it did it the best it could, and I had a lot better time than I did with Afterlife. And I think that's worth more to me than it being technically a better movie, like construction wise, is that I could just have fun with it.
I think in essence, I can get what you're saying. I just don't think I enjoyed it enough to overcome what the problems were. I think all the problems made it a more frustrating experience. There's definitely movies that are more of a mess that I kind of love, despite how messy they are. See me liking David Lynch's Dune more than modern Dune. But this is... It's like, you know, I gave the last one a 6, right? That's what I gave it. I gave it, you know, it got to a 6, and that was just about it. When we're at this level, like, it would have to be punching really high in the fun factor for me to go, you know what, despite all these problems and it being technically worse, I think it's better overall. I think it's in this really murky place where I'm not sure how, like, we're about to do the scores here, and I'm really not sure where I'm landing on the score, because I think there's things I definitely like in this movie more. I like what it's trying to be more, but I think it is such a goddamn shoddy, like, put together film that it's really hard for me to maybe hit the same number. So
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It just doesn't infect me as much, I guess. I guess that's where the division is here of agree to disagree, is that I had enough fun with it that it allowed me to overlook some of the more glaring errors.
Here's the beautiful thing, David, is that we don't have to agree. The point of this show is not to agree at the end.
Right. No, I understand. I'm just justifying to the audience, and then I'm kind of prepping for when we have to just decide where it is in the collection, because that's going to be a hellscape. So, I mean, I'll give my score then.
I don't think it's going to be that tough, but you give me your number.
I have been thinking about it basically as long as I've been talking about this movie, because I didn't know where I was coming down. I gave Ghostbusters 2 a 7.5. I also gave Afterlife a 6. So I think this one's a 7. I think I still had enough fun with this one that it is more than Afterlife, but I acknowledge that it still is lacking. There are still issues with it, but if you look back at our Ghostbusters 2 review, there were also issues with that. There were major, like, pacing issues and how we felt characters were handled. So I think that if I can say that Ghostbusters 2 is a 7.5, this one is at least closer to that than it is to Afterlife.
Yeah, I don't think this is close to Ghostbusters 2. I think this is far more poorly constructed. So for me, I'm going to go 5.5, and it was basically between that or a 5, and I was just sort of questioning if I wanted to go with the mid tier score, and I think ultimately I like some of the things in it, but like I have very little desire to watch this again, and I actually think it may be a slog to watch it again. I think that first hour when they're jumping around all the various subplots and building up to the villain, I think that might be a bit of a chore in a second viewing. I could be wrong, but I don't think the momentum is particularly good.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It's one of those things where I feel a rewatch may be better to get like tiny little references and stuff like that, but yeah, I do think that I'll mostly be ignoring stuff of like, oh yeah, this is him handing over the orb or whatever, because you get that on a first viewing. You don't need to like re-examine it for anything deeper.
It feels like it does almost feel like a TV episode where they shoehorned in like subplots from 5 other episodes into the one episode, and that's why the first half especially feels like it's jumping around all these things that don't really link together that well.
Yeah, I think honestly what we said at the beginning, you were probably right, is that we should have had an intermediate movie of them becoming the New York Ghostbusters, like them, their early days, they're starting out, them deciding to do this as like a job before we get like the full commit moving on with this.
Yeah. So As for does it make the collection? I think it doesn't. It's just a no.
I'm going to make the argument for cutting it close.
You can make the argument, but
we got to agree. I mean, I hear everything you're saying there, but like, do you honestly think that like it's straight up not worth ever revisiting?
I mean, we said the last one was cut from the collection, and I think this is worse. Yeah, but we
both agreed those were... I mean, that's fair from your perspective, but like...
so,
from my perspective, it's better, and 7.5 was a full-on makes the cut, so that's why I'm coming down on cutting it close.
I am adamantly saying this is a cut. I'm not saying it's a cut your losses. I'm not, shitting on it that highly, but I do not think it is a recommended... movie.
I'll give it to you only because like I know I'm a bit of a mark for in-theater movies. I enjoy the experience, so maybe I'm overvaluing, but I will say as I stand now, I would rather it be undercutting it close.
It's on the record.
All right.
The people know.
Right up until you cut it out of the edit and I never even get to know.
Oh, no. I don't mind them all hearing how wrong you are. Like, it's part of the show.
Well, hey, everybody, down in the comments, why don't you tell us who's more in the right here?
If any of you even cared enough to go see it, because it's not performing that well.
Is it not? I haven't kept up with box office.
It's performing around similar, at least the first weekend, to the last one, but it's a bit of a weird comparison, because the last one was 2021 when people were just kind of starting to come back to the movies, so... plus, there's another big blockbuster out this weekend, so it feels like it might be going down quite quickly.
It'll definitely tank. If it hasn't managed to hit its metrics by the first week, it's done.
Yeah. So we'll see if we even get a third one with this gang. But who knows? So, all right. That's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Meaning that if there is ever another one, we'll just do it on its own, because we've already done the rest. So... Well, the franchise,
beauty of getting a franchise finished, we can just come back whenever we feel like it.
So, yeah, it's just very, very murky franchise after those first two. But here we are.
Hold on, I've got it up here. Let me see. What is the average rating across all of it? So the average rating for Ghostbusters as a whole between all of our ratings was a 6.6.
Oh, for the whole franchise, okay, yeah.
For the whole franchise, including, I mean, do we count 2016 in there?
Oh, yeah, but they're counting the whole thing, yeah.
If we don't count 2016, it's a 7.3, so we know which one's dragging down the average pretty hard there.
Yeah, to be fair, like, yeah. I mean, the average for the first movie was 9.5, then 2 was 7.5, 2016 was 3.75, Afterlife was 6, and this one was 6.25. Like, that's, like... So, if people want to take an aggregate of our scores to see maybe what the official final score is, you can take it from those. But that is the show, everyone. Of course, I said earlier on, we do some bonus shows over in Patreon. 2 in particular with us, but there's other bonus shows for Screams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast that I do with Tim, and all that. But the shows that me and David do are the Criterion Cut every month, where we review a movie from the Criterion Collection, and at $5 and up in Patreon, we do extra reels where we review some of the worst movies ever made. Hopefully so bad they're good. We've got some Neil Breen on there, some Miami Connection, Dangerous Men, Mac and Me, Troll 2. It's a whole host of gems and favourites.
So good. Definitely want to do that show until I die.
I mean, an early death can be arranged if you want.
I somehow feel like you're going to pull Ghostbusters on me and somehow suck my soul out and just use it for things.
So, that was a weird couple of sentences. You're going to suck my soul and use it for things. Don't want to do any of that. Thank you very much.
You're the creepy old man in this relationship, Pete.
Oh, yeah. All right. You're the Marty McFly. Sure. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We appreciate it. And speaking of Back to the Future, go check out the science fiction movie podcast that me and David do, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, where Back to the Future is one that's coming up, I think, soon.
Yeah. A while out, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have paranormal immunity.